This is Newsroom. Hello and welcome once again from Johannesburg here in South Africa. My name, of course, Evan Jansen. The show is always live, broadcast from our studios right here in Auckland Park. Yes, between 9 and 12 every weekday morning, Monday to Friday. We are live via our streaming facility on YouTube as well, so you can watch us anywhere in the world. Isn't it nice how technology has changed the game for all of us? Anyhow, we've got a question to you today. We're dealing with the latest pronouncements around the national minimum wage. We're asking you, is a national minimum wage the way forward? What do you think? We'd love to hear your comments on it, because we'll have lots of different stakeholders in studio today to talk us through their views on a national minimum wage. At SABC Newsroom, that's where you send us your contribution. We'll put it up before the show is done today. Anyhow, lots happening in the news. As you would know, Elvis is standing by to give us an update.
Thank you, Evan. Our top stories this morning. President Jacob Zuma has dismissed allegations that the Gupta family has influenced the appointment of cabinet ministers. The issue of the Gupta's alleged influence on government set to dominate the ANC's National Executive Committee meeting starting in Irene outside Pretoria today. And the United Nations Security Council will meet the Moroccan government following its decision to withdraw from its international mission in the Western Sahara. Now, those are all your headlines, but before we get to the news, let's find out from Kendall Makamate what's happening on the sports front this morning. A very good morning to you, Kendall.
Elvis, a hearty good morning to you, and good morning to you at home as well. It's a Friday morning, and it's promising to be a cracker of a weekend. But this is what we've got for you in sports today, starting with this. Former FIFA Secretary General Jerome Valk is now set to face criminal proceedings brought by the Swiss Attorney General's office. And South Africa opens its account at the T20 World Cup this afternoon with a match against a desperate England.
Hamilton takes to the circuit. It will only be the fourth car on track, I believe.
And a record 21-race Formula One season begins with Australia. In Australia, rather, with Lewis Hamilton looking for his fourth World Championship. Like I said, promises to be a cracker of a sporting weekend. But I'll be bringing you all of that a little later at about 10:20 or so. Back to you, Al.
Thank you, Kendall. Let's take a look now at our top story this morning. President Jacob Zuma has dismissed allegations that the Gupta family has influenced the appointment of cabinet ministers. The president was answering questions in Parliament yesterday.
A much-anticipated question and answer session following the furore around the Gupta's involvement in cabinet appointments. President Zuma said it was his constitutional prerogative.
Section 91(2) of the Constitution provides that, and I quote, the President appoints the Deputy President and ministers, assigns their power and functions, and may dismiss them, unquote. The Constitution does not require me to consult anyone before I appoint or remove a minister or a deputy minister. Thank you, Madam Chair.
He insisted he had nothing to do with the Guptas approaching Deputy Minister Jonas.
I appointed Jonas as a deputy minister. That's what I offered Jonas. I never offered Jonas ministry. That's why he's a deputy minister. If Jonas says he was offered by the Guptas, I think you'll be well placed to ask the Guptas or Jonas. Don't ask me. Where do I come in?
The session was not without heated exchanges when the Speaker ordered the DA leader to leave the chamber after challenging Zuma's comments about the decline of the rand prior to Ntantla Nene being fired. The President also addressed the standoff between the Finance Minister Pravin Gordhan and SARS Commissioner Tom Moyane. He said he was dealing with the matter.
I am intervening on that question. I'm dealing with it at the presidential level. I have met both the minister and I've met the commissioner, and I'm addressing the issue.
He also assured the House that his government had a plan to deal with student funding. Mzwandile Mbeje, SABC News.
Meanwhile, the ANC is expected to tackle what has been termed state capture by business at its National Executive Committee meeting starting in Irene outside Pretoria today. Now, there have been mounting allegations of corruption and undue influence of the Gupta family in political appointments. Now, this follows allegations by the Deputy Finance Minister, Mcebisi Jonas, that the family offered him the post of Finance Minister. The ANC Youth League is now at odds with its mother body after calling for Jonas's recall following his statement.
They're showing the ANC middle finger, basically.
Let me state
this follows the statement by the Gupta family refuting Deputy Minister Jonas's claim. The family accused him of being part of a factional battle, while the ANC Youth League is calling for Jonas's axing.
We believe that the ANC must cleanse itself from Minister Jonas and must be called to DC to come and clean and be forced to provide evidence that will assist the ANC to deal with the elusive and unfolding concept of the state capture.
The League terms the reverberating phrase state capture as elusive. The mother body is not taking this line down.
One of the dangers of a youth league that does not apply its mind is that it can be used for factional purposes. And it is wrong of the ANC Youth League to open itself to that reality.
The fact of the matter is that
Sports Minister Fikile Mbalula, who was allegedly informed by the Guptas about his post, refused to comment.
I'm not going to answer that question. We are not governed by Guptas, we are not run by Guptas, we are not here for Guptas.
The Guptas have refused to comment. The SACP, meanwhile, is calling for a commission of inquiry. Aldrin Simpier, SABC News, Johannesburg.
News from further afield. The United Nations Security Council will meet the Moroccan government following its decision to withdraw from its international mission in the Western Sahara. Morocco has asked 84 international civilian members of MINURSO as well as the African Union to leave within 3 days.
Tension between Morocco and the UN is sky high, ostensibly over Ban Ki-moon's use of the term occupation, what the UN has since called a personal reaction to the deplorable humanitarian conditions Sahrawi refugees are living under.
The departments of both field support and peacekeeping operations are continuing planning for a number of possible contingencies due to what was announced yesterday by the Moroccan authorities. In addition, the permanent mission of Morocco transmitted to the Secretariat a list of 84 international civilian members of MINURSO, as well as the African Union, who, quote, should leave the Kingdom of Morocco within 3 days. As we've said, all of these measures would seriously impede the functioning of MINURSO and negatively impact on its ability to deliver its mandate granted to it by the Security Council.
The absence of an official reaction after the Council met behind closed doors on the matter points to a lack of consensus.
Either it is the reflect of a very dangerous strategy inviting to the resumption of war, or is a big bluff. In any case, what is at stake here is the United Nations Security Council obligation to keep MINURSO there, to keep and to defend, protect its mandate, which is the holding of a free and fair referendum in Western Sahara. Or if the Security Council is not going to take any action and to allow Morocco to continue these kind of irresponsible actions, then that will be a very dangerous outcome.
The UN has warned that Morocco's actions were unprecedented and a clear contradiction of its international obligations. Last year, the African Union called for a date to be set for the self-determination referendum. Sherwin Brycebees, SABC News, New York.
Now, that's your news for now. But remember that we're asking you a very important question today. It's all about wages. South Africans are waiting for a national minimum wage. And we're asking you that question today that relates to the minimum wage. What do you make of it, number one? And how do you think? Is this the way forward for South Africa to move forward? Let's see if we can get that question up and running there on your screen. And you can answer that question. And we'll have a lot of discussions around this because that's our theme for today, looking at the national minimum wage. You can let us know what's on your mind on the Facebook page as well as on the Twitter handle at SABC Newsroom. That Twitter page, of course, is also up and running. Well, we haven't got it up right now, but we'll do it for you a little bit later. But let's cross over to Eben for more.
Yeah, thank you very much, Jarvis. Very good morning to you if you've just joined us as well. Now, as South Africa ponders a minimum wage dispensation, researchers at Wits University's Economic Research Organisation, Corporate Strategy and Industrial Development, or CSID, they've come out in favour of a national minimum wage instead of sector-specific minimum wages. Now, critics of sector-specific minimum wage say it would lead to lower wages for sectors that employ women, young workers, migrant workers and people with disabilities. On the other hand, a national minimum wage has been touted as a mechanism to strengthen collective bargaining and address poverty and inequality. Now, to talk to us about the proposed minimum wages is Wits University School of Economics, Corporate Strategy and Industrial Development Senior Researcher Lotta Tekala-Greenish is with us this morning. Very good morning to you. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning.
Maybe we can start at the top. I'd maybe like you to tell our viewers what's the difference between national minimum wage and then sectoral minimum wage, and from your research, what are the benefits of both?
All right. Well, that question is, of course, heavily contested. So one of the ways to think about it is a sector minimum wage sufficient? And if it's not, why not? And the first way to look at it is who falls out. And the 2015 estimates for South Africa is that an estimate of 1 million workers are not covered by sector minimum wages. So sector minimum wage is a very important first step, but it's not sufficient to try and do something larger in the economy.
Now, you're talking about national minimum wage, that you are for this. Of course, the critics against it, they come and they'll tell you immediately you're going to see massive job losses in the short term. Can you give us the short and the medium term outlook maybe in both instances, and maybe tell us how do we mitigate those job losses that you would foresee in the short term?
So that's, of course, at the heart of the debate. So the overwhelming evidence from other countries that have implemented a national minimum wage, quite often replacing a sector minimum wage system, is that it's not an automatic response to have high unemployment. So there's no disputing that some areas of the economy will experience losses, as they do even if there is no minimum wage implementation, and some areas will experience gains. But the overwhelming effect is not automatically negative. And there's another way to think about it. So we think of what's going to go wrong, what do we fear? But actually, if we think, and you asked about the short and medium or even long-term effects, one of the key effects of a national minimum wage is to put the money where the consumption will take place.
Yeah. Where would that be?
So that is in the hands of the individual workers. So if you have a national minimum wage, rather than selecting certain individuals by sector, for example, to say you have the right to have greater consumption power and that will be a source of demand, let's equalize the board across the field. And in doing so, we shift money to where there will be demand for the goods and services of enterprises. So this is a win-win situation for the workers, but also in increased demand for enterprises producing these goods and services.
In recent weeks, Deputy President Cyril Ramaphosa came out. Of course, he's a big proponent for national minimum wage. He says the benefits in the, yes, we can deal with job losses, he says, but he said the benefits in the medium and long term is economic growth, is one, and in job creation. Do you share that same view?
Absolutely. So there's very good evidence from other countries, so especially recent studies from Indonesia, from China, Brazil, show that this change in the structure of the economy increases demand. So what we've been seeing in the past years is a focus on supply-side policies. These are useful and need to be complemented by demand-side policies. And rather than selecting specific areas of the economy, let's try and stimulate the economy across the board, and the national minimum wage does that in a way that a sector minimum wage does not.
Tell us about the countries that successfully implemented national minimum wage. How did they go about it? And if you can maybe look at their timeline, where they are now, and maybe give us a kind of idea of what sort of timeframes we'd be looking at in South Africa. So
other country insights are useful to get a feel of how things worked, but they will obviously not apply exactly to South Africa. Countries are different. But one example which is very interesting is the case of Malaysia, where a national minimum wage replaced existing sector wages in 2012. So it's a very recent development. Between 2012 and now, they've already increased that national minimum wage, and they've put in place other policies to support areas where enterprises might struggle, so giving some enterprises a bit of a break, giving them help and support. It's not possible to say what the overall effect is, but the employment statistics show that there isn't an instant reaction of grand unemployment coming through.
And the short-term job losses that normally follow, is that quite easily absorbed, or is it something that you really have to put programs in place in order to overcome?
Well, it depends very much on the economy, whether the economy has other sectors, other types of activities where labor with skills can move or labor without skills can move. If there is an informal sector, sometimes there is movement between these two. But I think I want to take that one step back. There isn't an automatic employment effect that can be proven to be the case every single time.
Yeah.
So that's one thing. And then this idea of absorbing changes in employment focuses very much on just employment as the only lever for enterprises.
Yeah.
But if you're the business runner, you have other levers as well. You can make things more efficient. So if your input costs increase, whether it's your raw materials or labor costs, you do things differently. You can charge more money to the customers. You operate differently, and this kind of stimulus is also good for the enterprises.
Yeah.
Surely it's good to do things more efficiently, more productively.
In conclusion, if you look at the South African economy where we are now, implementing national minimum wage, what kind of impact do you foresee for us?
Well, a national minimum wage requires some kind of enforcement. And so this is also another argument in favor of national as opposed to sector minimum wage. There needs to be focus on both implementing it, putting the legislation in place, but then enforcing that this is actually trickled down into the economy.
Yeah.
A national minimum wage is simple and easy for everyone to understand. So the first point is to create an awareness.
Yeah.
If every single worker, whether they're in the formal or the informal, whether in the specific sectors or whether they're unemployed, knows what that value is, then it will create a kind of collective awareness. Every single employer knows what that value is. It makes the implementation much more simple than if you have different sectors. Are you in this sector?
Yeah.
Is this the wage that applies or not?
I think the fairness will kind of resonate with all workers across all sectors. Thank you very much for joining us today. That's Wits University School of Economics, Corporate Strategy and Industrial Development Senior Researcher, Lotte Tegela-Greenish. Thank you for joining us today. We stay on the minimum wage. Let's just take a look at what you've been saying about this matter. Of course, it affects large sections of South Africa. As Meralda says, why spend time discussing minimum wage in South Africa with such huge lack of jobs? Better to talk unconditional basic income grant, in my humble opinion. Yes, indeed, it is a humble opinion. We talk about Max. He says a minimum wage would close down every garden and domestic cleaning service in South Africa. A little bit later, we will talk to the Domestic Workers Union, how this will affect them. Would you still be able to afford having domestic help is a question. This one from Kelly. Killing drug plan, SA reform and minimum wage will hike poverty and government costs long term. Liberals and Greens should not have voters for this budget. That is an international view on this matter. Very much, maybe we can say it's a little bit divorced from what's going on in South Africa. But the early prognosis is where it's been implemented, it's worked elsewhere in the world. Now, Fedusa. Mr. Dennis George is here this morning. He's sitting by with Elvis, ready to give us their view. There they are. They'll be with you shortly to talk about the implementation of the national minimum wage plan. Of course, there have been some meetings this week and some developments that are taking place. They will tell us what the latest or the word on the street is shortly. But let's take a quick look at the front pages from around the globe. We'll start in Europe, where the Times reports that Wafik Said, the billionaire philanthropist, former arms dealer and Tory backer, has been blacklisted by Barclays and told that it no longer wants him as a client. Then, in Israel, the Jerusalem Post says former Mossad chief Meir Dagan, who died yesterday, was Israel's #1 authority on Iran and led many daring operations that later enabled him to speak freely about how to deal with Tehran's nuclear program. That from the Jerusalem Post. Then the International New York Times reports the World Health Organization yesterday declared the end of a recent flare-up of Ebola in Sierra Leone, a nation where thousands have suffered from the disease. Yes, we've got news that 3 more cases have now been reported there. Let's come back to South Africa for a second. Take a look what's in our courts here today. In Johannesburg, here you have it, where the Constitutional Court is set to hand down judgment in a high-profile case in which the DA is challenging the constitutional validity of Section 11 of the Powers and Privileges and Immunities Act of South Africa. Then in the capital, Pretoria, former Hawks head Anwar Dramat, Major General Shadrack Sibea and Captain Leslie Maluleke are expected to appear in the Pretoria Magistrates Court on various charges, including kidnapping, defeating the ends of justice and illegal deportation. Then, down in Cape Town, 4 suspects are expected to appear in the Wynberg Magistrates case for the murder, and I tell you it was a high-profile murder of a 16-year-old girl in the Tukai Forest. Francisca Blockleger was allegedly raped and strangled. We'll be sure to keep you updated on these court cases, or you can just go to our Facebook page any time of the day, anywhere in the world. We'll keep you updated with what's happening there. I can tell you, Dennis George is here to talk about, is the national minimum wage the way forward? He's sitting by with Elvis, but before we get to them, we're going to take a short break. See you now.
Good afternoon. You're watching the Midday Report.
Lunchtime news amplified.
But for now, this is what they call home. Their hope to shift to higher ground seems to be against the tide.
Midday Report provides you with more than just news stories.
I just want Port Elizabeth to know that they own a world-class theatre.
Good afternoon. You're with the news at 1 in the headlines.
Very good afternoon to you. This is News Live. I'm Natasha Thorpe. Let's take a quick look at what's coming up in your headlines.
Good afternoon and welcome to A View from the House.
For all things news, tune in to Midday Report weekdays at 12 noon only on the SABC News Channel.
Talking about the national minimum wage, government must prioritize the process of establishing the national minimum wage. Now, critics of the sector minimum wage say it would lead to lower wages for the sectors that employ women, young workers and migrant workers and people with disabilities. Federation of Trade Unions of South Africa, Fedusa, says, therefore, it is critical to implement the national minimum wage in order to reduce increasing inequalities between the rich and the poor. Now, to talk to us about how the national minimum wage will impact on workers, we are joined in studio by the Federation of Trade Unions of South Africa, Fedusa, Mr. Dennis George, the General Secretary. A very good morning to you, sir, and welcome.
Good morning.
Firstly, update us on the process currently, the latest with regards to the national minimum wage and the NEDLAC process. What is happening?
Yeah, no, look, we are making very good progress regarding our technical task teams, looking at the technical details, and we're expecting to get a report from them where the Deputy President will chair the meeting so that the Committee of Principals can then, make a kind of an adoption and then make a recommendation to the President so that we can have a national announcement on what is going to be the level, which sectors could most probably be excluded, and so forth.
But if we're talking about exclusion, then we're not talking about a national wage. That means we're talking sector-specific wage.
Yeah, look, no. What we are looking at is to try to find a policy instrument that is going to assist us to do away with the apartheid legacy of wages. Remember, in our country, we had job reservations, and black people in particular were employed at very, very, very low salaries. And that gave rise, even today, that we have this challenge of poverty and inequality in our country. And what is important for us is we must address that issue, and we must address it very urgently.
Is that the need for the national minimum wages, to redress all these issues?
Yes, but you must remember the national minimum wage is an instrument that has two edges of the same sword. On the one side, it increases people's income, and therefore people will be able to purchase more and stimulate economic growth. On the other side, it's a cost factor for the companies. And that is where the big challenge comes in, because the challenge is that companies say, in some cases, if you make the minimum wages too high, that's going to lead to job losses, and then workers are saying, look, we already are working poor at the moment, and we can't make ends meet with the salaries that we are getting, and therefore it's important that we find the right magic space for where we're going to set the minimum wages.
But let's talk about the numbers relating to a national minimum wage. What are we looking at? Because we heard stories about 3,200 Rand. Would that perhaps help in solving this issue? Is that good enough, or perhaps too little for average workers in South Africa?
Yeah, let me give you an example. We have sectorial minimum wages for domestic workers, where the wages is currently 1,900 Rand a month. But in a bargaining council setup for the hairdressing industry, we're sitting with a situation that people that's working in hairdressing salons are earning just a little bit above 1,200 Rand. Now, if we take your scenario of 2,300 Rand, that means that salary of that hairdressing owner is going to almost increase 3 times. So you could imagine now what we're going to do with that particular industry. So Fedusa's approach is that we must have a phase-in approach, where we say to the people, look, this is where we're starting from, and this is where we want to be in 2 or 3 years' time. Because that would most probably be kind of a wise approach, where we're going to start and where we want to finish.
Now, so what I'm hearing is that you're looking at a phased approach, and it could be perhaps sector-specific.
Yeah, look, the other issue is also this. We want this instrument to complement what is already being done in bargaining councils, because trade unions have for many years, one of our trade unions in the leather industry, have been setting wages for their sector for more than 90 years. And if a person look at what is the minimum wages in that sector, we're looking at like 5,000 Rand per month, where employers and trade unions have come together and then look at rewarding our people in that sector. But we must also understand that there's different sectors, and the dynamics for different sectors is different.
Now, you, Amanda, travel around the world quite often. You've just been on a trip with the finance minister to basically talk to investors and a lot of other business people around the globe. But is there empirical proof in some of the countries where a national minimum wage is actually working?
Yes, there's lots of case studies. For instance, Germany have introduced recently a national minimum wage. England have introduced a national minimum wage. And the amount of job losses have not been documented as such. But you must understand South Africa's labor market is different. Germany didn't have apartheid. They didn't have legislation and situations and colonialism. And so therefore it was probably much more easier for them. That's the reason why I think the Committee of Principals are very concerned about this issue. And I think at the end of the day, they will come up with a magic number.
What is the negatives of a national minimum wage?
Look, the negative is very straightforward, is the issue of job losses. Okay? And
the positives?
The positives is there's quite a lot of positives. A national minimum wage can stimulate inclusive economic growth, because what happens is workers will be receiving a higher income, and so therefore they will be able to spend more. It will also assist them to get out of poverty. But on the other side, you must also understand the way that our country and our cities are situated. Workers are normally placed far away from workplaces. So they spend about 25% of the income only on transport, and this transport that they're spending on is mostly taxis, and it's not subsidized by the state. And so therefore they feel the issue of wages is quite important for them.
Somebody said that we're living in very interesting times, Mr. George. This week we've seen a rate hike. We've also heard about state capture in this country. But you are meeting with Moody's this afternoon as Fedusa.
Yeah, Fedusa and also our colleagues from Cosatu and also NACTU, we're going to talk as labor, to talk to them to say, look, our country, need to get some breathing space. I think there's quite a big overreaction. regarding the political environment that impacts on the national issues. I think the government has replaced Pravin Gordhan, as finance minister. We've got lots of confidence in him. We've also got confidence in National Treasury. And I think it's important that we must give the social partners and the Minister of Finance an opportunity to drive the process forward.
Mr. George, thank you so much for your time and joining us here on
Thank
Newsroom.
you very much.
That was the Federation of Trade Unions of South Africa, Fedusa's General Secretary Dennis George in studio. The national minimum wage, is that the way to go? We'd like to find out from you. We'll take a quick, in fact, we won't take a break. Let's now go to your comments. This one, the Steve Biko lecture quickly descended last night into chaos as students disrupted a panel discussion on transformation. Now let's take a look at some of your comments. Remember that you can send us your comments at SABC Newsroom. This one from Cornelia Asante says, deep respect and gratitude to all who ensured that the 2016 Steve Biko Ethics Alive lecture proceeded as planned. We owe his legacy respect, says Cornelia. Uyanda Purple Dancer says, turning to Morning Love, just saw some disturbing clips in Wits University. Steve Biko at the Steve Biko lecture, says Uyanda Purple Dancer. Look at that. There's some of the pictures that you have there on your screen on the Twitter handle there. The upheaval last night at the Steve Biko lecture. This one from SABC News Online. Steve Biko lecture at Wits University turns ugly. Very ugly, as you can see on your screen. There's some more pictures there that you can see. That one from Sadna Bolton. It sent it through to us. Says, symposium students disrupt the Steve Biko ethics lecture. At Ian, the reporter there, Sadna Bolton, sent us that particular one. Absolutely incredible pics there. Now let's take a look at what's happening on our Newsroom Facebook page this hour. The African National Congress, the ANC, is expected to tackle what is being termed state capture by business, in particular the Gupta family at its National Executive Committee or NEC meeting starting in Irene outside Pretoria later today. And then the accounting firm KPMG has scored top honors at the Universum Awards as the most attractive company to work for in South Africa. Most attractive? I'd like to find out, what does it actually mean, the most attractive company to work for? And finally, it is perhaps appropriate to reminisce on the eve of one's 80th birthday. And at this age, I can assure you that there's a great deal about which I can reminisce. Look at that. There's some of the things that you can reminisce about. Now, for more news and updates, you can follow us on Facebook, that Facebook handle there, as well as search for Newsroom on the Facebook page. You'll find us, and you can look at some of the comments. Now, the question that we pose to you, is the national minimum wage the way forward? Send us your comments to our Twitter handle at SABC Newsroom. Like us on the Facebook page. By the way, if you like us there, you become part and parcel of our growing family, and you can post your comment on the Facebook page. Right now, let's take a quick break, and we'll be right back with Eben with some more on the minimum wage. You have to stay tuned. We'll hear from the domestic workers on the issue as well. Stay tuned.
For victory requires intense effort and teamwork. When you get to it, there is no turning back, because all eyes are on you. When it's action time, nothing should stand in your way. Sports Live tackles and analyzes all the sports action. This is the home of all your sport news, updates, and more. Sports Live weekdays at 8:30 p.m.
Okay.
Thank you. Welcome back at Newsroom on SABC News. Now, the disruption of last year's State of the Nation address will return to the spotlight today when the Constitutional Court hands down judgment on an application by the Democratic Alliance. The DA wants the Constitutional Court to confirm an earlier Western Cape High Court order that part of the powers, privileges and immunities of Parliament Act was unconstitutional. National Assembly Speaker Balagambete used Section 11 of the Act to direct police to remove Economic Freedom Front members who disrupted President Jacob Zuma's speech last year. Let's now cross to our reporter at the Constitutional Court, Aldrin St-Pierre. Very good morning to you, Aldrin. Are you there? Well, unfortunately, Aldrin St-Pierre is not ready yet. So let's carry on with our theme today. Of course, our theme today deals with the national minimum wage. Now, for more on the minimum wage increase, South Africa's Domestic Service and Allied Workers Union says they're still the lowest paid workers in the country. Now, we are joined by Sindiswa Ningiza from the South African Domestic Service and Allied Workers Union in our Cape Town studios this morning. Sindiswa, very good morning to you. Thank you for joining us here on Newsroom.
Good morning, and good morning to the viewers.
Just tell us, how does Satsawu feel about the implementation of the national minimum wage?
Although it is going to be difficult, but we feel so good because we've been for a long time abused and also getting a low wage. So now when it comes to the national minimum wage, we are happy, because at least there will be something that is going to take us somewhere as domestic workers.
Are you not afraid maybe that this kind of minimum wage will lead to massive job losses, especially for domestic workers? Because if we have a national minimum wage of, say, 3,500 or 4,000 rand a month, individual families will battle to pay that kind of amount monthly for the services of a domestic worker.
We are afraid of job losses, but because the employer can negotiate with the employee about this national minimum wage, it is not easy then for the domestic workers to speak with the employers. But if the employers can call us in our offices, and then we ask them to come in with the employee so that we explain how is it going to happen. There can be negotiations between the employer and the employee, not to pay all the minimum wage at the same time, but 70%, that can be 3,500, the employer can pay, and then the rest they can negotiate so that maybe the employer can pay 1,000 rands, but until the end of the year, the employer must be already paid that minimum wage.
What about domestic workers that live with their employers? If you implement a national minimum wage, does that also mean now that domestic workers have to pay their employers for board and lodgings going forward? And how would that impact your workers?
I think there is nothing going to be changed if the employer was deducting that 200 rand from the employees' wages. Then it will continue, because the employer mustn't deduct more than 200 from the employees' wages. So those who are living in, they will still going to get the minimum wage, the national minimum wage, that is 4.5. I think so.
Do you have any fears that increasing wages for domestic workers could make this kind of service unaffordable for South Africans?
I feel the South Africans now at this juncture is time for them to open their hearts, because domestic workers were very marginalized for a long time. Then now it's time for them to open their hearts, to give something that will make a domestic worker very happy, because some of them, they pay more of this minimum wage, but there are those who do not comply even with this minimum wage that is 2.2.
Sindiswa, thank you very much for joining us. That is from the South African Domestic Service and Allied Workers Union, coming to us live from Cape Town, talking about how this will impact on the lives of South Africa's domestic workforce. Yes, lots of those employed in the sector will be affected, and well affected, by national minimum wage implications. Of course, a little bit earlier I was crossing to Aldrin Sampear. Unfortunately, Aldrin was battling with some technical difficulties. He's back now with us. Very good morning to you, Aldrin. You're inside of the courtroom by the looks of it.
Yes, I am inside of the courtroom where we expect judgment to be handed down with regards to the constitutional validity of Section 11 of the Powers and Privileges Act. As you mentioned earlier on, that's the section that Speaker of Parliament Baleka Mbete used during the State of the Nation address last year, when she evicted members of the EFF when they disturbed the president when he was delivering the State of the Nation address. And remember that she called on security or police force to evict the members of the EFF. Well, the DA contested the Section 11 of the Powers and Privileges Act at the High Court, and the High Court ruled in their favour, saying that that section was indeed invalid, but it said that it's giving Parliament about 12 months to try and remedy the situation. However, the DA then decided to come to the Constitutional Court, where they want confirmation from the Constitutional Court that Section 11 of the Powers and Privilege Act is indeed invalid, and as well they're appealing the 12-month period that has been granted by the High Court to remedy the situation as given to Parliament. However, the Parliament, on the other hand, is arguing that Section 11 is not unconstitutional, and will be hearing what the judges here have to say with regards to that argument from Parliament.
Now, Aldrin, this case has had a lot of media interest and a lot of interest from political parties. We've seen protests, marches to the court and so forth. It looks a little bit more quiet there today. Is that an accurate assessment on my part?
Well, indeed, it is quiet if you compare it to other cases. For instance, if you compare it to the time when the Constitutional Court first heard this matter, it was a bit of a packed courtroom, or the packed gallery here at the Constitutional Court. But this time around, we don't have members of the public here in the public gallery, just members of the media. And we've just seen the counsel for the DA arriving here at the Constitutional Court, or those who will be listening in for the judgment to be handed down.
And how do you expect matters to proceed this morning? Do we get underway at the top of the hour at 10 o'clock?
Well, I have to say that the Constitutional Court justices and judges are well known for being quite prompt when it comes to delivering the judgments. We know that the Constitutional Court judgments were always handed down around about 10 o'clock, and those judgments are really short. It's a brief judgment given by one of the judges, and then we'll have it's a summary rather given by one of the justices here, and then we'll have the full judgment, which will be handed out later on at one of the officials here at the Constitutional Court. So we expect proceedings today to be quite short, just the summary which will be read out.
Thank you very much, Aldrin Sampear, coming to you live from inside the Constitutional Court. I can tell you matters will proceed. Judgment will be in that. Of course, the powers and privileges in Parliament very much under the spotlight there. Of course, our spotlight today on the show focuses also on the national minimum wage. Now, analysts indicated that no other country in the world has ever embarked on such a massive hike in minimum wages and covering so many workers. Well, the last word today will be by Neil Coleman. He's Cosatu's strategist coordinator. He joins us via Skype from Cape Town. A very good morning to you, Neil. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning, Evan.
Neil, give us a quick overview. Where do you guys stand on the national minimum wage?
Well, Evan, our departure point is there are two critical issues facing the labour market in South Africa. The one is the levels of poverty amongst the majority of workers in the country are unacceptably high. And the WITS National Minimum Wage Research Initiative calculates that about 5.4 million workers who are working full-time, which is about 54% of all workers, are living in poverty. And the second is the unacceptably high levels of wage inequality between those at the bottom and those at the top. So what the national minimum wage does is it provides a floor below which no worker should fall, and creates if you like, a social protection mechanism to ensure that these conditions of extreme poverty and inequality in the labour market are addressed, not only through the national minimum wage, but then in addition through a system of collective bargaining in the different sectors, which would negotiate wages above the level of the national wage. That, in essence, is what a national minimum wage would do, and has been very successful in achieving in a number of countries internationally.
The critics say it's going to lead to short-term job losses. Some say massive jobs, but bloodbaths will follow after this implementation. What do you think of that, and what do you say to those critics?
You know, Eben, whenever powerful interests are affected, they'll always create a form of hysteria, scare stories, etc., to try to prevent any interventions which are going to threaten what they perceive to be their interests. But we believe it's not only in the interests of the working people whose conditions will improve, but in the interests of society at large. The current situation is simply unsustainable. And those sorts of scare stories about massive job loss have been used in other countries, such as, for example, in Germany, which introduced a national minimum wage last year. They predicted job losses of up to 2 million job losses. And in fact, what we've seen in Germany is the creation of about 170,000 jobs and the reduction in the number of low-paying, casualized jobs. The international experience, which the WITS National Minimum Wage Research Initiative has documented extensively, and other institutions like the PRU at Cape Town, is that the national minimum wage internationally has had very minimal, what the economists call negligible, statistically insignificant effects on employment. So the national minimum wage is not the instrument that needs to be used to deal with the unemployment challenges in the country. Those are other economic instruments, other instruments of economic policy, such as macroeconomic policy, industrial policy, investment, and those sorts of areas. What a national minimum wage can do, and has done very effectively in a number of countries, is by increasing the level of demand for goods in the economy, and the Deputy President referred to this in Parliament recently, by putting money in the pocket of the poor and workers, creates increased demand. Now, if government puts the right policies in place, it can take advantage of the stimulus which is created by rising income. But by itself, that intervention won't create the jobs. You need complementary policies.
You're in the Western Cape, so it's something that you'll be quite aware of. I want to talk about some of the most at risk. We spoke to domestic workers a little bit earlier. I now want to shift the focus to something that you guys in Cape Town with Cosatu work very closely with. That's the plight of farm workers. Now, minimum wage and these kinds of discussions have been ongoing. You've been met with a lot of resistance on the part of farmers and the like. other stakeholders in Cape Town. How do you go about implementing this kind of thing in the farming sector? How do you monitor it, and how do you keep business owners and farmers honest in this space?
Well, that's an interesting word, Eben, honest, because basically any employer should not be happy with a situation where someone's working for them full-time cannot feed their family. And we're actually talking about the ability to feed your family, not even to clothe them, send them to school, pay for basic medicines, etc. And a very well-known research institute found that when workers were striking for 150 Rand a day, they found that 150 Rand a day was granted. Remember, 2013. Even if that 150 Rand was granted, those workers would not be able to afford sufficient food for their families. So what you saw was government, through the Employment Conditions Commission, introduced a minimum wage in the farm sector in 2013 of 105 Rand a day. That was a 52% increase on the previous wage. A job loss bloodbath was predicted. In fact, if you look at Stats SA figures from 2013 to 2015, the number of workers employed in the agricultural sector has increased quite substantially. So there is no, it's what I was saying earlier, there is no mechanical relationship between the level of wage and the level of employment. It's about a whole lot of other things. But in the negotiations, and I coordinate the negotiations from the labor side, I represent the three federations in the negotiations together with a team. What we've done is we've put forward specific proposals in relation to the most vulnerable sectors, which you've identified, namely the agricultural sector and the domestic sector. And what we've proposed is the use of a mechanism which has been used internationally, which is to introduce a national minimum wage for the entire economy, but to introduce it at a slightly lower level. You remember domestic worker representative spoke about 70%. So, for example, internationally, what is often done is that a tier is created where the domestic workers are paid 70% of the national minimum wage, farm workers are paid 80% of the national minimum wage, and gradually you incorporate them into the full national minimum wage. So there are mechanisms like this which can ensure that you phase it in, allow for the sectors to adapt. Labour is not blind or impervious to these realities, and therefore whatever we do, we'll do responsibly. But what we can't allow is for continuation of the system of super exploitation of workers, which has been inherited from the apartheid period. It's simply an unsustainable situation and will lead to an explosion, as we saw in the farming and mining sectors.
Thank you very much, Neil. We've run out of time. I thank you for joining us today. Sobering views from Cosatu. That's Neil Coleman. He is the strategy coordinator in Cape Town, talking to us about the most at risk farm workers specifically and domestic workers in particular. That's, well, our question today, of course, national minimum wage. What are your views on it? You can send it to us at SABC Newsroom. We'll put it up a little bit later in the show when we look at some of your responses. But let's go get a weather update now with Philip Hawkins, who's standing by.
Yeah, thank you so much. Well, we're going to start off with a weather report in terms of your cloud cover for today. We're starting off, first of all, taking a look at the southern parts of Western Africa. Here we're seeing dense bands of cloud cover moving over the area. It's already bringing in rainfall, and it is set to continue to do so later into the day. And as you can see, in terms of your rainfall, that does move in conjunction with that down the western coastline as well, and then in towards that eastern coastline in the eastern interior. Expecting a fair amount of rainfall there. And as we move through the day, we're going to see that rainfall continuing and, in fact, intensifying in many places. Widespread showers forecast over the Limpopo province of South Africa, as well as over most of Zimbabwe. For today, we're going to see those showers continuing, but mitigating themselves into tomorrow. We're going to see only about a 30% chance of showers in that region. Let's take a look in terms of your citywide temperatures for today. Pretoria peaking at 27 degrees, slightly warmer than it was yesterday, expecting isolated showers. As you can see, those showers continue all the way throughout Pietermaritzburg and the surrounding areas towards KZN. There, Cape Town today also expecting a bit of rainfall as a result of a low pressure system moving in from the southwest. Lilongwe and Lusaka are quite warm for today, 27 and 29 degrees respectively, despite some fairly dense cloud cover and a lot of rainfall coming into the area. As you can see, though, that rainfall continues around towards Kigali and Nairobi and moves even further north towards South Sudan. There in Juba, 38-degree maximums. In northern Sudan, of course, we're expecting much warmer temperatures. Khartoum, 37, and temperatures further north from that, possibly even getting very much warmer. Now, temperatures as we move further north continue warmly in towards Riyadh and Mecca, 30 and 34-degree highs respectively. Tehran for today, a 12-degree maximum, so it is going to be fairly mild to cool there, but we are expecting sunny skies, so a beautiful one there nevertheless. Cairo's at 25 degrees, no rainfall, just a bit of cloud cover, and the same can be said for most of North Africa's major cities. Benghazi's at 23 degrees, temperatures around Algiers at 19 and Rabat 18 degrees. So as you can see, some fairly mild temperatures, no rainfall for today, but those temperatures are going to continue into the following days to be rather mild. What's not mild is temperatures in the interior of West Africa. Bamako at 41 degrees, another very hot one there. Niamey at 37. And as you can see along the southern coastline, as we spoke about earlier, dense cloud cover, lots of rainfall, and this is what you can expect for today. It does intensify later this afternoon, but we are going to see that dissipating later into the evening and into tomorrow morning as well. Bangui at 36 degrees, temperatures of 37 in Brazzaville and Kinshasa. Now, these areas are expecting some very, very high levels of humidity, and of course, in an area that is so used to high humidity, this is going to feel very, very much warmer than 37 degrees Celsius. Now, this is where you can send us your feedback or your queries. SABC weather at sabc.co.za is our email address. Alternatively, give us a call. 011-714-5077 is the number. That's where we leave your weather for now. Stay tuned.
A very good afternoon. You're watching the Midday Report.
Lunchtime news amplified.
But for now, this is what they call home. Their hope to shift to a higher ground seems to be against the tide.
Midday Report provides you with more than just news stories.
I just want Port Elizabeth to know that they own a world-class theatre.
Good afternoon. You're with the news at 1 in the headlines.
Very good afternoon to you. This is News Live. I'm Natasha Thorpe. Let's take a quick look at what's coming up in your headlines.
Good afternoon and welcome to A View from the House.
For all things news, tune in to Midday Report weekdays at 12 noon, only on the SABC News channel.
Ahika Manor produces abstract and symbolic works of art. He called his latest collection Vote with Ink, Not Blood.
Praying for peace, literally, in my own way.
The South African film titled Luister or Listen in Afrikaans tackles issues of race in the country.
I think that the end goal is the reformation of institutional culture, but how we get there is in fact through changing the language policy so that no student is forced to learn in Afrikaans.
It's fashion designers like Julia Mpoko who are starting to pay more attention to menswear and hope to make a mark in the fashion industry.
So regardless of whether you're African, European, there's certain styles that you like. So if an African man enjoys wearing simple, well-tailored pants, then yes, I guess.
Join Refulo Mula for that 1 hour weekly dose of arts and entertainment news every Friday at 9 p.m. on Trends.
How does this extreme heat affect basic conditions of living?
Food spoils more readily, and the risk of food poisoning outbreaks or food poisoning in a household.
Should we experience another heat wave soon, and it's coming?
First sign is always thirst. Thirst is a sign that already your body started to be dehydrated. And that's a very early sign that most people will be able to sort of pay attention to and then act on. That doesn't warrant any serious medical attention. But the minute that you start to feel slightly nauseous, that you start to feel dizzy, that's a sign that you need to stop what you're doing, get out of the sun, get into a cool area, slow down your intensity, get hydrated, cool down.
Join Dr. Silla Mutawung every Saturday from 9 till 10 in the morning.
Well, it is 10:00 hours Central Africa time on this Friday, the 18th of March 2016. This is Newsroom on SABC News, Channel 404, Jumbo Africa, and a very warm welcome to the second hour. We broadcast live from our Auckland Park studios in Johannesburg, South Africa, to the rest of the African continent. I'm Elvis Preston. I'll be with you until 12 o'clock. We're also streaming live on YouTube, with the entire show now available on our YouTube channel. Question that we pose to you today: the national minimum wage, you heard about it, you heard some of the arguments. Is the national minimum wage the way forward for us here in South Africa, where everybody will benefit and grow our economy? That is the question. But first, let's now take a look at our news headlines. The Constitutional Court will today hand down judgment in a case in which the DA is challenging the constitutional validity of Section 11 of the Powers and Privileges and Immunities Act. President Jacob Zuma has dismissed allegations that the Gupta family has influenced the appointment of cabinet ministers. And the issue of the Gupta's alleged influence on government and government capture set to dominate the ANC's National Executive Committee meeting that is starting in Irene outside Pretoria today. Now, those are all your headlines, but before we get to the news, let's find out from Kendall Martin what's happening on the sports front. Very good morning to you.
Elvis, good morning. It's a Friday morning and we're all expecting a massive weekend sports-wise, and we've got quite a lot of things on the go: Formula 1, T20 cricket, rugby, and so on and so forth. But before I get too far ahead of myself, good morning to you. This is what we have in the sports today. Former FIFA Secretary General Jerome Barker is now set to face criminal proceedings brought by the Swiss Attorney General's office. And South Africa opens its account at the T20 World Cup this afternoon with a match against the desperate England. And a record 21 race Formula 1 season begins in Australia, with Lewis Hamilton looking for his 4th World Championship.
On the Mercedes this year, if you look at the head-on shot, it looked...
And that's exactly what we'll have for you a little later on at about 10:20 or so. Be sure to stick around for that. Back to you, Elvis.
Thank you, Kendall. He will be back later. But right now, your top story this hour. The disruption of last year's State of the Nation address will return to the spotlight today when the Constitutional Court hands down judgment on the application by the Democratic Alliance. The DA wants the ConCourt to confirm an earlier Western Cape High Court order that part of the powers, privileges and immunities of Parliament Act was unconstitutional. National Assembly Speaker Boesak used Section 11 of the Act to direct police to remove the EFF members who disrupted President Jacob Zuma's SONA address last year. The DA's application is opposed by the Speaker and others who argue that Section 11 does not infringe on an MP's constitutional privileges, but rather prohibits conduct by members that stops parliamentary proceedings from continuing.
On 12 February 2015, whilst the President was delivering the State of the Nation address in Parliament, a member of the Economic Freedom Fighters inquired when the President was going to pay a portion of money spent on security upgrades at his Nkandla private residence in accordance with findings made by the Public Protector. The Speaker responded that the State of the Nation address was not the occasion for raising questions of that nature. Dissatisfied with this, members of the EFF continued to raise the issue, refusing to accede to a request by the Speaker to leave the chamber. All the while, the President's address had come to a complete halt. The Speaker directed police officials to remove the members of the EFF from the chamber in terms of Section 11. When members of the applicant, the Democratic Alliance, learned that it was police officers that had removed the EFF members, their leader expressed the view that this action was unconstitutional, and the DA members walked out of Parliament. The DA filed an application in the Western Cape Division of the High Court challenging the constitutional validity of Section 11 of the Act on the ground that it was incompatible with a member of Parliament's constitutional privilege of free speech and immunity from arrest. Furthermore, the DA contended that the section violated the principle of separation of powers by empowering the Speaker or Chairperson who are part of the legislature to order members of the security forces who fall under the executive arm of state to arrest members of Parliament during parliamentary proceedings. The High Court held that Section 11 was constitutionally invalid to the extent that it authorized the arrest of a member for conduct that was protected by the immunity against arrest and the privilege protecting parliamentary free speech entrenched in Sections 58(1) and 71(1) of the Constitution. It did not rule on whether Section 11 violated the principle of separation of powers. Before this court, the DA seeks confirmation of the High Court's order. It is also appealing against the remedy ordered by the High Court, as well as that court's decision not to address the separation of powers issue. The respondents, namely the Speaker, the Chairperson, and the Government of the Republic of South Africa, are appealing against the judgment and order of the High Court. They argue that Section 11 does not infringe a member's constitutional privilege of free speech and immunity against arrest, but instead prohibits conduct or speech by members which stops or threatens to stop parliamentary proceedings. In their view, this type of conduct and speech is not protected by the Constitution. Additionally, they argue that the provision does not offend the doctrine of separation of powers. I have penned a judgment which is supported by the majority. Museneke DCJ, Cameron J, Khampepe J, Vandervesezen J, and Zondo J concur in it. The majority judgment notes that the privilege of parliamentary free speech and the members' immunity against arrest that are at the center of this dispute are key to our democracy. Without the privilege and immunity, debate in Parliament might be stifled. This would be deleterious to our democracy. The pluralistic nature of our parliamentary system must be given true meaning. Each member of Parliament has a right to full and meaningful participation in and contribution to the parliamentary processes. We can be assured of the best possible legislative outcome only if the parliamentary process admits of the expression of the views of the smallest party, listening to the opinions of the timorous, and being tolerant of the expression of even the most unpopular thought. However, parliamentary free speech is not absolute. The Constitution empowers Parliament to determine and control internal arrangements, proceedings, and procedures, and make rules and orders concerning its business. This power facilitates the maintenance of order and discipline. Parliament may do this by various means, including the temporary exclusion of disruptive members from the chamber. The Constitution also provides that the privilege of free speech is subject to Parliament's rules and orders. In terms of the Act, causing or participating in a disturbance is a criminal offense for which members are liable to be arrested in terms of Section 11. Surely, the threat of arrest for a criminal offense with all that may ensue has the potential of inhibiting free speech in Parliament. Based on this, the majority concludes that if person in Section 11 includes members, it does limit the privilege of parliamentary free speech. This limitation is at odds with the constitutional stipulation that free speech may be subject only to Parliament's rules and orders. The question is, does person in Section 11 include members? The majority judgment observes that throughout the Act, person preponderantly includes members. When interpreted both contextually and purposively, person in the section includes members of Parliament. The majority judgment holds that the omission of the words other than a member after the word person in Section 11 is inconsistent with the Constitution. It rectifies the constitutional defect by reading in these words. It dismisses both the appeal and cross-appeal. The concurring judgment by Nugent A.J. agrees with the majority judgment insofar as it emphasizes the importance of free speech in Parliament and that Section 11 of the Act is unconstitutional insofar as it relates to members of Parliament and its committees. The concurring judgment, however, holds that arrest in Section 11 of the Act has a wider meaning to that of the majority judgment. The concurring judgment holds that arrest is not confined to arrest with the object of prosecution, and that the mere act of seizure or forcible restraint, which is what occurred in this case, for whatever purpose, constitutes an arrest which is constitutionally impermissible. In a dissenting judgment, Jafta J., in whose judgment Kabinde J. concurs, holds that the word person in Section 11 must be interpreted restrictively to exclude members of Parliament. He concludes that if it is so construed, Section 11 of the Act is consistent with Sections 58.1 and 71.1 of the Constitution. He reaches that conclusion on the application of the reading down principle, which entails that where it is reasonably possible, a statutory provision must be read in a manner that makes it consistent with the Constitution. The following order is made. 1. The declaration of constitutional invalidity of Section 11 of the Powers, Privileges and Immunities of Parliament and Provincial Legislatures Act 4 of 2004, made by the High Court of South Africa, Western Cape Division, Cape Town, is not confirmed. The omission of the words, open quote, other than a member, close quote, after the word, open quote, person, close quote, at the beginning of Section 11 of the Powers, Privileges and Immunities of Parliament and Provincial Legislatures Act is declared to be inconsistent with the Constitution. That was 2. 3. Section 11 of the Act is to be read as though the words, open quote, other than a member, close quote, appear after the word, open quote, person, close quote, at the beginning of the section. 4. The appeal is dismissed. 5. The cross appeal is dismissed. 6. The respondents must pay the applicant's costs, including the costs of to counsel. I hand down the judgment.
Court adjourns.
And there you have it. The case is dismissed with cost to the applicant. Let's move on now. President Jacob Zuma has dismissed allegations that the Gupta family has influenced the appointment of cabinet ministers. The president was answering questions in Parliament yesterday.
A much-anticipated question and answer session following the furore around the Gupta's involvement in cabinet appointments. President Zuma said it was his constitutional prerogative.
Section 91(2) of the Constitution provides that, and I quote, the President appoints the Deputy President and ministers, assigns their power and functions, and may dismiss them, unquote. The Constitution does not require me to consult anyone before I appoint or remove a minister or a deputy minister. Thank you, Madam Chair.
He insisted he had nothing to do with the Guptas approaching Deputy Minister Jonas.
I appointed Jonas as a deputy minister. That's what I offered Jonas. I never offered Jonas ministry. That's why he's a deputy minister. If Jonas says he was offered by the Guptas, I think you'll be well placed to ask the Guptas or Jonas. Don't ask me. Where do I come in?
The session was not without heated exchanges when the Speaker ordered the DA leader to leave the chamber after challenging Zuma's comments about the decline of the rand prior to Ntantla Nene being fired. The President also addressed the standoff between the Finance Minister Pravin Gordhan and SARS Commissioner Tom Moyane. He said he was dealing with the matter.
I am intervening on that question. I'm dealing with it at the presidential level. I have met both the minister and I've met the commissioner. and I'm addressing the issue.
He also assured the House that his government had a plan to deal with student funding. Mswandi Lembeje, SABC News.
The Steve Biko lecture turned into chaos as students disrupted a panel discussion on transformation. The lecture was taking place at Wits University in Johannesburg last night.
Unresolved matters spilling into the discussion. Chaotic scenes filled the auditorium. It all started as the Northwest University Vice-Chancellor was commenting on the recent banning of a library at the Mafikeng campus. Disgruntled students claim Vice-Chancellors remain ignorant on financial exclusion. But after an hour, peace was restored. The panel continued with the discussion.
If you ask me what is the possibility for addressing access, you kick off for now with the free education for the poor. The rich must, if you like, pay for it, and the middle classes, we look at a mechanism on a new funding vehicle.
There is no university, for example, that has enough residence accommodation. Most universities have residences for about a quarter of their students. We have been appealing to the state because residences are based on capital grants from the state. It's not something we kind of fund out of the fees.
What is the way forward?
Students raised their challenges on campuses.
It's easy to do so much more when you have food in your stomach, when you have somewhere to live, when you're not stressed about where your next meal is coming from.
Students feel more needs to be done.
Some of the persons who spoke did not directly address the issues of fees must fall. Maybe more direct open engagement is needed.
We're frustrated. We've been trying to talk, and it seems speaking does not help.
But vice-chancellors say government needs to come to the party. Marigate Amatabe, SABC News, Johannesburg.
A Centre for Leadership in honour of Alan Boesak has been launched in Cape Town. The former anti-apartheid activist and cleric thanked the community of Cape Town for their support during the launch. Boesak says the centre will stand for justice. He now works as a lecturer at an American university. Archbishop Emeritus Njonjonkulu Ndungane delivered the inaugural Alan Boesak public lecture. Ndungane commended Boesak for being an inspirational leader. He says the centre will play a role in developing leaders of moral integrity.
What a moment of hopefulness and inspiration as we gather in this magnificent place to dedicate this center in the Alan Boesak Legacy Center. May all who go through the doors of this center be inspired by the example that our dear friend Alan set. Here is a man who gave his life for the greatest cause, which is the liberation of humanity.
Congregation in struggles for justice, living with a pastor whose name is in the newspapers every single day, and not simply to praise him, and having to defend your pastor in your places of work, and sometimes with those who employ you. My colleagues in the NV Kerk who have heard from congregations in the Dutch Reformed Church in those days that they have decided to stop their support of those congregations. Van vra maar jou geld by Boesak. I know of those things. And yet, you remain so steadfast. You remain so true to your calling. You remain so clear in your own commitment to what was right.
Further afield now, the United Nations Security Council will meet the Moroccan government. following its decision to withdraw from the international mission in the Western Sahara. Morocco has asked 84 international civilian members of MINURSO, as well as the African Union, to leave within 3 days.
Tension between Morocco and the UN is sky high, ostensibly over Ban Ki-moon's use of the term occupation, what the UN has since called a personal reaction to the deplorable humanitarian conditions Sahrawi refugees are living under.
The departments of both field support and peacekeeping operations are continuing planning for a number of possible contingencies due to what was announced yesterday by the Moroccan authorities. In addition, the permanent mission of Morocco transmitted to the Secretariat a list of 84 international civilian members of MINURSO, as well as the African Union, who, quote, should leave the Kingdom of Morocco within 3 days. As we've said, all of these measures would seriously impede the functioning of MINURSO and negatively impact on its ability to deliver its mandate granted to it by the Security Council.
The absence of an official reaction after the Council met behind closed doors on the matter points to a lack of consensus.
Either it is the reflect of a very dangerous strategy inviting to the resumption of war, or is a big bluff. In any case, what is at stake here is the United Nations Security Council obligation to keep MINURSO there, to keep and to defend, protect its mandate, which is the holding of a free and fair referendum in Western Sahara. Or if the Security Council is not going to take any action and to allow Morocco to continue these kind of irresponsible actions, then that will be a very dangerous outcome.
The UN has warned that Morocco's actions were unprecedented and a clear contradiction of its international obligations. Last year, the African Union called for a date to be set for the self-determination referendum. Sherwin Brycepease, SABC News, New York.
The European Union leaders in Brussels have agreed on a common position to present to Turkey in return for Turkish help in easing the refugee crisis. Now, under the proposed plan, migrants arriving in Greece from Turkey will be sent back in exchange for financial aid and visa-free access to Europe for the Turks. The EU leaders are meeting the Turkish Prime Minister in Brussels on Friday to try and clinch the deal, that is today.
EU leaders are offering Ankara financial and political concessions if it stops migrants reaching Greece. French President François Hollande says the EU-Turkey deal, which aims to cap the influx of migrants into Europe, has to be a comprehensive plan.
What I insisted upon was that this should be a comprehensive plan, which means it applies to Turkey, since Turkey will agree to readmit, to take back migrants who arrived from Turkey via Greece, and who were not able to assert their rights. Turkey will take these migrants back.
Greece Prime Minister Alexis Tsipras, facing a build-up of more than 40,000 refugees stranded in Greece by recent border closures in Balkans, says his economically struggling country needs more help to care for migrants. EU officials said Greece also needed time to set up legal and administrative structures to carry out the deportations.
Today, Greece is the one making the effort and who will make the effort tomorrow. And it is very important that titles be delivered quickly to those who will arrive, or to obtain the right of asylum, or to be escorted back to Turkey.
After a year in which more than 1 million people have arrived in Europe, fleeing war and poverty in the Middle East and beyond, EU countries are looking desperately to Turkey to seal its coastline and stem the flow. Ankara's central objective, visa-free travel for Turks to Europe by June, will depend on Turkey meeting a raft of long-standing EU criteria.
Well, that's your news for now. We'll take a short break and Kendall will be back with your sports news after that.
Get all the latest news from the SABC's online news services on our website. Breaking news and in-depth coverage of everything from business, sports to politics and lifestyle. Catch the top news clips and watch live streaming of major news events on the SABC News YouTube channel whenever. Stay connected on the SABC News Facebook page and have your say on news that matters to you. And for the latest headlines and live updates from our reporters, follow us on Twitter. SABC Digital News, anytime, anywhere.
Good morning, welcome back. My name is Kendall Makhamate. I've got your sports on Newsroom. Our top story is about FIFA, SAFA and the Ministry of Sports. The shockwaves from the FIFA corruption scandal that exploded in May 2015 in a posh Zurich hotel just before the leaders of football's governing body were set to meet for Congress have been felt far and wide. Just yesterday, our own Minister of Sports, Fikile Mbalula, took to a press conference to assert once again that South Africa had not bribed its way to the 2010 FIFA World Cup. Now, we will bring you that story a little later, as soon as we can. And as soon as our program catches up with where we would like to be.
I will ensure that we do not allow South African citizens to be victims of global syndicates and subjects of unfair treatment by global bodies that show no regard to the sovereignty of our state.
There we go. That was the Minister of Sports asserting that he will stand by the three SAFA officials that were banned by FIFA. Now, former FIFA Secretary General Jerome Valk, banned for 12 years by soccer's governing body for ethics violations, is facing criminal proceedings by the Swiss Attorney General's office. Valk, whose job was to ensure the smooth running of FIFA and in particular its flagship World Cup tournament, was the right-hand man to banned former President Sepp Blatter for nearly 8 years. He is suspected of criminal mismanagement and other offences. Valk's U.S. lawyer, Barry Burke, was not immediately available for comment. FIFA is mired in the worst crisis in its 112-year history, with corruption investigations underway in Switzerland and the United States. Several dozen people, including senior football officials, have been indicted in the United States, while Swiss authorities have also opened a criminal investigation into Blatter, who's been banned for 6 years by FIFA's Ethics Committee. Last month, FIFA ethics judge Hans-Joachim Eckert found Valk guilty of misconduct over the sale of World Cup tickets, abuse of travel expenses, attempting to sell TV rights below their market value, and destruction of evidence. Eckert said Valk acted against FIFA's best interests and caused considerable financial damage to FIFA. Now, staying with the world of football, but now going to the field of play, Liverpool boss Jurgen Klopp was left delighted as his side knocked rivals Manchester United out of the Europa League with a draw at Old Trafford, and his old club, Dortmund, crushed Tottenham 5-1 on aggregate to progress to the Europa League quarter-finals. Now, here are the highlights of Manchester United's demise.
It's deep. Oh, and it's a really good chance for Jesse Lingard. Well, that's the first opportunity of the game. Hung in the air for ages. And out of nowhere, Lingard got up highest, and Mignolet got a strong arm out to just parry it to safety. Sturridge with a clever flick. Here's Lallana. Sturridge wants it again in the centre, and Lallana almost found him. Firmino leaves it for Coutinho. What a wonderful save from David De Gea. Once again, this is Martial, and still Martial goes down. Penalty. Anthony Martial brought down by Nathaniel Klein. It's the right decision. Martial finds the net against the Reds again to give Manchester United hope of turning the tie around. Coutinho. Still Coutinho away from Varela. Coutinho! Oh, that's magnificent! That is absolutely wonderful from Philippe Coutinho. And it could be the goal that sealed success in the tie for Liverpool. What a hammer blow for Manchester United, right on the stroke of half-time. just dinked it over David De Gea.
Which brings us, of course, to a quick look at the Absa Premiership fixtures for this upcoming weekend. All very important matches. As you know, there are about 7 matches across the board to go to the end of the season. Golden Arrows, they host SuperSport United in Chatsworth, Durban, 3:30. And then Free State Stars play Polokwane City in Goble Park. Both matches on Saturday, 19th of March. Then on the afternoon of Sunday, the 20th of March, at the Royal Bafokeng Stadium in Phokeng, Platinum Stars play Black Aces, and Chipa United host Maritzburg United at the Nelson Mandela Bay Stadium. And now to World Cup news, stories that have been trending for the last 24 hours or so. Sri Lanka opened their T20 defence with a hard-fought 6-wicket win over Afghanistan. This at Eden Gardens in Kolkata. Afghanistan battled the Proteas in their next Group 1 match, while Sri Lanka will tackle the in-form West Indies.
Afghanistan won the toss and sent Sri Lanka to field first. With the current Super 10 champions missing their star bowler Malinga, Sri Lanka's bowlers did superbly to restrict Afghanistan to just 36 for 1 after the first power play. The Afghanistanians were in the pot of bother on 47 for 3 after the 10th over. However, their innings blossomed in the second half of their overs, registering 104 in their last 10 overs. Skipper Afghanistan's guy topped the score with 62 of 47 deliveries. In the end of their innings, Afghanistan managed to post 153 for 7. In reply, Sri Lanka fared slightly better with 41 for 1 after their power play. Tilikarantni Dilshan, 83 not out from 53 deliveries, was good enough to ensure the defending champions get over the line. Joseph Mohale, SABC News.
Now here's a quick look at the Super Rugby fixtures for this coming weekend. As you know, some matches have started already. In fact, the Hurricanes in force, their match should be over. And the last time I checked, it was 41-6 to the Hurricanes, thumping the Force out at the Central Energy Trust Arena. Just now we'll have the Waratahs against the Highlanders. Big matchup, that one. Bulls against Sharks, South African derby on tonight, Friday the 18th of March. Tomorrow, Saturday the 19th, we've got a host of matches, 6 matches in total. Sunwolves against the Rebels. Sunwolves in the first season of Super Rugby. Crusaders, they're playing against the Kings, who come back, and they've had a fairly torrid affair of coming back to Super Rugby, the Kings. Reds against the Blues. Lions against Cheetahs at 5:05 this afternoon, Saturday afternoon rather, than at 7:15 in Cape Town is Brumbies and the Jaguares of Argentina. They will be playing the first Super Rugby match ever played in Buenos Aires at the Estadio José Amalfina at 20 to midnight on Saturday night. We take a short break, and when we come back, we've got more news. We will be previewing the Proteas match against England in the next Sports Bulletin. Stay tuned.
And I'm Prabhakshani Chetty Miller, SAB Miller, Anheuser-Busch InBev. It's something that I need to learn to say more often.
Will together produce around 1/3 of the world's beer.
It is a mouthful. Have you ever considered skin bleaching?
Nigeria tops the list of African countries with 77% of its women bleaching their skin.
Now I can see that it is not good because it affects my face and some of my body parts.
Thousands of Arab Israelis and Palestinians participated in a big rally.
Flight MH17 was shot down by a Russian-made missile.
How those chips may fall is a prediction best left to the currency of time.
That's Primetime News, Africa Journal, and Your World on SABC News.
Welcome back. Now, the South African Reserve Bank Governor, Lesetja Kganyago, has announced an expected 25% basis point hike in interest rates to 7% to help keep inflation in check. In January this year, SABC's Monetary Policy Committee decided to hike that repo rate by 50 basis points, if you can recall. That brought it to 6.75% at its last meeting. This now means the prime interest rate is now 10.5%. Meanwhile, GDP figures show that South Africa's growth rate in the fourth quarter of 2015 was only 0.6%. The forecast for GDP growth in 2016 are now well below that 1% mark. On the back of this, you know, the ratings agency Moody's is in South Africa after the country was placed under review for a possible downgrade. And then, of course, shocking revelations of possible state capture this week. Now, to discuss these and other factors relating to the economy, we are joined by economist Professor Raymond Parsons from the Northwest University School of Business and Governance, SBG. Professor, very good morning to you and welcome.
Good morning, Elvis.
SABC Monetary Policy met yesterday, a committee met yesterday. They slapped us with a hike of 25% basis point. Was that expected?
Well, I think half of our business community and our economists were expecting it. The other half thought perhaps we might have a pause in this interest rate cycle. But as you know from our previous discussions, Elvis, at the present point in our business cycle, I'm a dove, not a hawk. I don't think it's appropriate at this point that we should be raising interest rates further. And it's interesting to note that half of the Monetary Policy Committee now agrees with me because the vote was even, 3 against 3. I assumed that perhaps the governor has a casting vote. But it's interesting that last time they were 3-2-1. In other words, 3 wanted a 50 basis point increase, 2 wanted only 25 basis points, and 1 wanted no change. So I see some movement in my direction as a result of this vote. But it does show that it is a difficult debate, that there are arguments on both sides. It's a judgment call at the end of the day, and people can differ as to where they put the priorities. Those who would prefer us to not increase interest rates, like myself, are much more concerned about growth and jobs. Those who think we should push interest rates up further feel that inflation is the biggest threat. And that's where the difference of opinion is. And I think for myself, I just think that this is not the right medicine at the right time.
So what does this medicine of 25% basis point hike mean now for rising inflation as well as our very fragile economy?
Well, that's the challenge. I think one feels that at this point, just wanting to put up interest rates further is not really going to cure the kind of inflation we're facing. If we had a boom that was threatening to get out of control, I'd be the first one to be a hawk and say, well, at some point, the Reserve Bank has to put on the brakes. But we're dealing with a very special kind of inflation at the moment, which is being pushed by the Eskom tariffs, by food prices, the drought, and by the weak rand. And that's not so amenable to being able to curb that just by simply putting up interest rates, because this is all coming at a time when your growth rate is weakening. So the danger here is if you push these interest rates too far, we're going to see stagflation in the South African economy, which really immobilizes you. That's high inflation with no growth. And then where do you go when you've got the credit rating agencies now also breathing down your neck saying, but you should be growing and you must have your finances under control and we want to see better growth prospects.
And then, of course, we have external shocks, such as the currency declines. We have the possible downgrade by very moody rating agencies in our country, the labour, service delivery unrest, continuing power supply problems and constraints. Well, constraints rather, shall we just put it that way. The drought and food prices going up and inflation, and all these factors keep the economy on the brink of recession. By the way, how far are we from that cliff?
Well, I would say that that is precisely the argument, probably of half of the Monetary Policy Committee and myself, is that you're not going to get much gain out of wanting to put up interest rates further. The solution lies elsewhere. And in the present circumstances, you're not, if you look back over the past 2 years, I mean, the argument is, well, look, as a result of the decision yesterday, now we see that overnight the rand has improved. Well, we don't know whether it's improved because of what we did or because the day before in the United States, they didn't put up interest rates. So that could have been a factor. But the important point is if you look back over the past 2-year cycle of interest rates rising, yet the rand is weaker than it was 2 years ago. So quite clearly that connection is extremely weak. And there's no guarantee that what we do here in terms of monetary policy is going to make a difference to the rand. The two issues are what happens in the world economy and other factors such as political factors in South Africa, which affect the rand, and against that, I can't see how monetary policy can make much of a difference.
The overall economy remains uncertain and very vulnerable, and as we know, that ratings agency Moody's is in the country. And of course, we heard about state capture during the course of the week. Policy uncertainty speaks to that. What does this all mean for us as a country?
Well, I think this week has been a bad week for our brand South Africa, certainly from a political point of view and an economic point of view. And what's important now is to emphasize that that's where the solutions lie. Don't look to the Reserve Bank to be able to solve these problems. There are crucial political and economic decisions that require to be taken now. And we need to send a message out to the credit rating agencies, to South Africans, to the investment community abroad, that we are going to address these issues, that we are going to resolve them, that we are going to show the political leadership that's needed, not just the economic technicalities. It's way beyond those, as this interest rate decision also shows.
Can we avoid junk status or a notch above junk status from Moody's?
Well, I think that we must remember there are 3 credit rating agencies all going to look at us in the next few months. I think we've got to show not just that we've got our fiscal metrics under control, but that we are taking the right political decisions that inspire confidence, that reduce uncertainty, and above all, we can't put all this on the shoulders of the Minister of Finance. I think the important point is the credibility of what we do as a whole as a country now. And unless that message comes through, I think we're not going to avoid it. So we'll have to work very hard in the next few months and do a couple of dramatic things that will start to win back some confidence, and also, I think, buy us the necessary time for other things that will take longer to turn around and show a positive outcome.
Final thought, Professor.
Well, you know, there is a saying, Elvis, don't waste a good crisis. So whether it's the credit rating agency's threats, whether it's Gupta Gate, whatever it may be, let's see what the opportunities are to take better decisions to turn the situation around. So let's not waste a good crisis. Let's turn it to good account.
Well, not waste a good crisis, Professor. As usual, thank you so much for your time and joining us here. That was Professor Raymond Parsons, an economist from the Northwest University School of Business and Governance. They call it the SPG right now. In our weekly news slot, it's called The Economy. Watch out for that every Friday, right here on Newsroom.
Yeah, thank you, Elvis. Very good morning to you. If you've just joined us, I've got some news. The Constitutional Court has just ruled that part of the Powers, Privileges and Immunities Act of Parliament used to have members removed during last year's State of the Nation address is constitutionally invalid. Let's cross to our reporter at the Constitutional Court, Aldrin Sampier. Good morning to you, Aldrin. Just give us a quick overview.
Well, good morning, Evan. Yes, the judgment handed down by Justice Madlanga, the majority judgment that is that Section 11 of the Powers and Privileges Act is indeed unconstitutional or constitutionally invalid. And the argument there is that a word arrest in the Act, which allows, of course, the Speaker of Parliament to call in the police and arrest members of Parliament who are unruly, or as the section reads, persons who are unruly, is unconstitutional or is constitutionally invalid. They've also made some amendments to the Act, saying that what the Act should instead read is that the MPs, or rather, that the National Assembly Speaker Baleka Mbete can call on the police to evict persons either then or other than members of Parliament. So no members of Parliament can be evicted by police, so she can't use that rule to evict members of Parliament. Instead, they must use the mechanisms already available in Parliament, like the sergeants and arms in Parliament, to make sure that they remove MPs who are unruly or disrupt the business of the day.
Aldrin, I noticed that it's quite quiet at the Constitutional Court this morning. Have you managed to get any reaction to this ruling this morning?
Well, we had the DA. They were in court listening into the judgment, and of course they're quite ecstatic that this judgment has been handed down. They say that the Section 11, as previously before this ruling, was unconstitutional, and insofar that it amounted to a coup if you allowed, for instance, the armed force to come in Parliament and evict members of Parliament, or even allowing the police as well to evict members of Parliament. So they believe that this ruling by the Constitutional Court confirming the High Court judgment will definitely ensure that freedom of speech within Parliament is not stifled, because remember that MPs enjoy the privileges of what they say in Parliament whatever they say in Parliament cannot be used in a criminal case. So that is what they enjoy currently in Parliament, and they say that Section 11, as amended by the Constitutional Court now, definitely does ensure that freedom of speech is not stifled. However, though, they did fail, though, to get the Constitutional Court to rule on the 12-month period. Remember when the High Court made the ruling saying that Section 11 is unconstitutional, it gave Parliament 12 months to remedy the situation. Yeah. The Constitutional Court has now dismissed that appeal by the DA.
Aldrin, thank you very much for that update this morning. That's Aldrin Sampear at the Constitutional Court giving us, well, some update after that ruling this morning. Now, moving on. As parents, we often think that we send our children to school, they will learn all the life and social skills needed to be a well-rounded adult. But we live in the time of social media, creating a platform for antisocial behavior, the time of the selfie, as well as the usual bullying, peer pressure and self-criticism. Children may have a tough time avoiding low self-esteem and depression. Worldwise Kids is an organization that believes assisting young children through coaching has positive long-term effects in a person's adult life. Now, joining me in studio this morning is Worldwise Kids co-founders Kathy Stewart and Ilse Kaiser. Very good morning, ladies. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
This is a very interesting concept. I like it because the children are so young. Tell us about Kathy, about life coaching for young children with this particular focus that your organization has.
So, Irban, I have been, up until now, a pre-primary teacher for the last 16 years. I've taught in both private and in government schools, and I just really found towards the end of my teaching career that our children were not coping with the social and emotional demands that they were up against, and there was nothing being offered in the schools that covered the things that we offer in this program as it stands at the moment.
Now, Ilse, we always hear about life orientation. I come from an era where life orientation was take out a book and read. To today's world, tell us the difference between what you do and the kind of life orientation we have in schools today.
I think when we were looking at what we were wanting our children to learn with today's stresses that they go under, life orientation is actually only being offered in the high schools. Yeah. There is a program in some of the junior schools, but from what we researched is that they were not happy with this program. So our program focuses on children from 6 to 12, which is not being focused on at the moment.
What do you do with children from 6 to 12? Do you teach them about leadership and the wide world and about leading yourself? What do you engage them with?
This program is so beautifully developed in that it's taught through a series of stories. Mm-hmm. So all the messages and all the life lessons come through a series of stories, and it is really only geared for children between the ages of 6 and 12. And research has shown that if we don't instill strong belief systems before this age, it becomes too late. If our children do not have strong positive self-esteem, if they do not understand how precious they are and how they can be the leaders in their own lives at a young age, they often make bad decisions, they are coerced into peer pressure, they become victims of bullying and racism, and we are hoping to get in at a really young age to just elevate and extend and support our children.
Now, also we hear about belief systems being installed. What kind of belief systems are these? Are we talking about religious systems? Does it have a Christian background? What kind of belief systems then?
I'm going to hand this over to Kathy because she is the life coach. Okay. I'm just the co-founder.
This program was devised by a woman in America called Renee Thornbarrow, and her program is broken up into 3 parts. The first part is very basic life skills.
Yeah.
So we teach our children how to not have a victim mentality. We teach our children how to honor their uniqueness and so forth. And then it goes on to the actual core belief systems, which are honesty, integrity, respect, and gratitude. And to become a well-rounded adult, these have to be in place. It's not optional, and actually it's something that a lot of our children don't know. Life is busy. Parents are busy.
It's something a lot of our adults don't know,
Absolutely,
to be honest.
and that's why she developed the program. She was in the corporate world, and she just found that adults did not have the emotional intelligence that they needed to cope in such the pressures that we cope with today. So I'm hoping if I can begin with our kids young enough, I can instill these core beliefs, and then obviously the whole life coaching aspect, which is aimed at our older children.
Now, Ilse, I'm going to get you to answer something. Tell me, we live in a very interesting time, I think, especially for young people. We live in the sort of social media, the area of self-obsession, if one can call it that. That in itself brings brand new problems to a young person. How is it different being what do you call it, a toddler? Is it a toddler, or is it just a tween? A tween? Just before?
You know what? I think our tweens are exposed to so much more than we were exposed to when we were tweens. I actually went to a very interesting talk last week about how parents are now bringing up their children in our social media frenzied world, and how we need to up our game with our knowledge of, because we don't have that knowledge.
Yeah.
So they're being exposed to a lot more than we were exposed to when we were younger. The cyberbullying that takes place on WhatsApp, the sexting. And it's also very interesting to note that if you do something now as a tween, that's going to follow you through your whole life. So when you apply to a university, they can go back on your Facebook page or on your Twitter account and see what you got up to when you were a young child. And I don't think the children of today realize this.
The impact it will have.
Yeah, I don't think adults realize that, to be honest.
Yes.
But because a lot of my friends are in the same trouble all week in, week out with social media. People don't understand it's a broadcast platform, and whatever you put on there will scar you for life, very much like this television platform that I work on. So I'll be very comfortable with that. But I want to ask you, there's the kind of criticism that your work would get is parents, teachers and the like. They will tell you that you can't teach life skills such as confidence and happiness and this kind of thing a person has to learn and deal with in day-to-day life. How do you respond to that?
Do you know, I would say, Irvan, that absolutely you cannot teach a child to be happy. You cannot. But you can equip children to have strong moral compasses, to make good decisions that increase their self-esteem, that increase their ability to make positive and well-rounded decisions. You can't teach a child to be self-confident. You can equip them with the skills that they need to make well-rounded decisions, to be confident, to honor their uniqueness. That really is how her program
Absolutely fantastic. I love this idea. I love your work, ladies. Thank you for joining us today. Worldwise Kids co-founders Kathy Stewart and Ilse Kaiser, they're with us this morning. If you've got a tween, I didn't even know that I've got a tween. My daughter, she's 9 years old. Well, she's kind of teaching me a little bit of the life skills at the moment. She's ahead of the curve. But thank you for joining us today, ladies. Worldwise Kids. That's the business you've got to be looking out for if you've got a 6 to 12-year-old who's starting to act up at home a little bit. Yeah, Wisdom Certified Coach. That's what you want to achieve. Anyhow, let's move on. Take a look at the front pages from around the African continent this morning. We'll start in Lesotho, the Mountain Kingdom, where the Lesotho Times reports that the government has lost millions of maluti after construction of King Letsie III's new palace that was stopped because its design did not meet the required standards. Then we move to Namibia, where the Namibian says crumbling walls, collapsing roofs and dysfunctional toilets are what pupils at Unkonjatu Combined School have to put up with on a daily basis. Also, Swaziland, the Observer reports that His Majesty King Motsoati III has said national disasters like drought derail the country's plans to reach first world status by 2022. as funds are often diverted to help the nation in addressing those disasters. First world status for Swaziland by 2022. That's what King Mswati III, that's what his plan is, and the drought has derailed that process. What do you think of that? Anyhow, we'll be back at the top of the next hour with another complete update. See you then.
As stories are broken around the world, SABC makes sure you do not miss out. As the stories unfold throughout the day, News at 8 updates all newsworthy stories worldwide. Globally, we are there. Locally, we leave no story untold. Make a date with News at 8 every Saturday and Sunday on SABC News, Africa's news leader.
I'm Peter Ndoro.
And I'm Chetty Miller, SAB Miller, and Hauser Bush Imbev. It's something that I need to learn to say more often.
Will together produce around a third of the world's beer.
It is a mouthful. Have you ever considered skin bleaching? Nigeria tops the list of African countries with 77% of its women bleaching their skin.
Now I can see that it is not good because it affects my face and some of my body parts.
Thousands of Arab Israelis and Palestinians participated in a big rally. Flight MH17 was shot down by a Russian-made missile.
How those chips may fall is a prediction best left to the currency of time.
That's Primetime News, Africa Journal, and your world on SABC News.
Vera Ephraim defied family and traditions to follow her dream.
Decided that I'm going to prove to them that they were wrong.
The first breakthrough came in when she was studying and touring in Europe.
That was my first breakthrough.
Generations was her first television debut in South Africa.
It was my first gig. I was very excited. I was very happy. I said, yeah, this is confirmation I'm at the right place.
After pain, rejection, and suffering, her dream became a reality.
I followed my path, and I'm happy and grateful and blessed.
Join your host, Wileng Mulabati, on Rupilong every Friday at 17:30.
We kick off this week's show by seeing how Kenyans are paying tribute to the victims, as well as not only how they've coped, but how they returned stronger after the attacks.
Last year, images of the 4-day Westgate Mall attack saturated front pages.
In the Democratic Republic of Congo, artists have assembled to celebrate the peace this war-torn country has not had in a long time.
No conflict that can't be solved without a conversation.
The Journal, every Saturday at 1:30 on SABC News.
News Today takes an in-depth look on news locally, continentally, and globally. We bring the world to your home. We cover all economy news extensively to keep you informed. We are live to break news as and when they happen across the world. We analyze news using experts in all aspects. Make a date with News Today every Monday to Friday from 3 to 5:30 p.m.
Trends follows fashion designers, cultural and lifestyle issues when and as they happen.
I'm always excited to see what the new fresh talent is bringing along. I'm always excited to see the direction that the designers are going in.
We celebrate the brilliant works of playwright in Mpumalanga.
When everybody else talk about their own challenges, some talk about maybe the whaling that happens around Japan and other areas, I can be able to say, look, we have been confronted with the problem whereby our rhino population is going down.
We never miss previews of movies locally and abroad just to keep you informed.
So I'm a partner.
Welcome to the big boys.
Join Refulo Mula for that 1 hour weekly dose of arts and entertainment news every Friday at 9 p.m. on Trends.
It's 1100 hours Central Africa time on this Friday, the 18th of March 2016. This is Newsroom on SABC News, channel 404, Jumbo Africa, and a very warm welcome to the final hour as we broadcast live from our Auckland Park studios in Johannesburg, South Africa, to the rest of the African continent. I'm Elvis Preston. I'll be with you until 12 o'clock. As you know, we are also streaming live on YouTube with the entire show now available on our YouTube channel. Now, let's take a quick look at all your headlines. The Constitutional Court has ruled that part of the powers, privileges and immunities of Parliament Act used to have members removed during last year's State of the Nation address is constitutionally invalid. President Jacob Zuma has dismissed allegations that the Gupta family has influenced the appointment of cabinet ministers. And the issue of the Gupta's alleged influence in government set to dominate the ANC's National Executive Committee meeting. That's the NEC meeting today. We'll give you some more on those stories a little bit later. But first, let's find out from Kendall Makamate what's happening on the sports front.
Elvis, good morning to you and good morning to everybody at home as well. It's a massive weekend. It's Friday. It's going to be sporting all the way around, wall-to-wall sports, and I'll be sure to bring you everything on Monday morning. But in the meantime, let's tell you what we've got for you in today's bulletin. Now, former FIFA Secretary General Jerome Valk is now set to face criminal proceedings brought by the Swiss Attorney General's office. And South Africa opens its account at the T20 World Cup this afternoon with a match against desperate England.
To the circuit, it'll only be the fourth car on track, I believe.
And a record 21-race Formula One season begins in Australia with Lewis Hamilton looking for his fourth World Championship.
If you look at the head-on shot, it looked...
And that's what we've got for you in the sports. I'll also be hopefully chatting to Stephen Goddard, one of the referees and soccer officials who've been banned by FIFA. He's upset, I tell you. Make sure you don't miss that. Elvis, back to you.
Thank you, Kendall. He will be back a little bit later. Now, remember that we're asking you a question today. Do you still remember the question? You heard the arguments from various, from Fedusa as well as from the Association for Domestic Workers, as well as from WITS in terms of what they would think a minimum wage, a national minimum wage would make up for. And we're asking you the question then today. What do you make of it? And do you think the national minimum wage is the way forward? I want to know from you on the Twitter handle at SABC Newsroom as well as on the Facebook page. And I will read your comments. Like right now, there's a couple of tweets that came in. Let's have a look here at Tamsanka says, SABC Newsroom, the minimum wage will create a spiral economic system and increase consumer saving and spending power, says Tamsanka. This one from Slick Rick says, yes, many people are exploited. We need a minimum wage. There's a hashtag already there from Slick Rick. And let's take a look. No, in fact, that's the only ones that we have there. So you can comment on the Twitter handle at SABC Newsroom. I'll take your comments as we continue this morning. Now, the Speaker of Parliament will no longer be able to direct the arrest or the use of the police to eject members of Parliament from debates. This is our top story this hour. This was the finding of the Constitutional Court today, which has confirmed a Western Cape High Court judgment that Section 11 of the Powers and Privileges and Immunities of Parliament and Provincial Legislature Act is unconstitutional. The case arises from the ejection of the EFF members from Parliament in February last year after they demanded that President Jacob Zuma pay back some of the money spent on his Nkandla home.
The following order is made. 1. The declaration of constitutional invalidity of Section 11 of the Powers, Privileges and Immunities of Parliament and Provincial Legislatures Act 4 of 2004 made by the High Court of South Africa, Western Cape Division, Cape Town is not confirmed. The omission of the words, open quote, other than a member, close quote, after the word, open quote, person, close quote, at the beginning of Section 11 of the Powers, Privileges and Immunities of Parliament and Provincial Legislatures Act is declared to be inconsistent with the Constitution. That was 2. 3. Section 11 of the Act is to be read as though the words open quote other than a member close quote appear after the word open quote person close quote at the beginning of the section. 4. The appeal is dismissed. 5. The cross appeal is dismissed. 6. The respondents must pay the applicant's costs, including the costs of true counsel. I hand down the judgment.
Meanwhile, President Jacob Zuma has dismissed allegations that the Gupta family has influenced the appointment of cabinet ministers. The president was answering questions in Parliament yesterday.
A much-anticipated question and answer session following the furore around the Gupta's involvement in cabinet appointments. President Zuma said it was his constitutional prerogative.
Section 91(2) of the Constitution provides that, and I quote, the President appoints the Deputy President and ministers, assigns their power and functions, and may dismiss them, unquote. The Constitution does not require me to consult anyone before I appoint or remove a minister or a deputy minister. Thank you, Madam Chair.
He insisted he had nothing to do with the Guptas approaching Deputy Minister Jonas.
I appointed Jonas as a deputy minister. That's what I offered Jonas. I never offered Jonas ministry. That's why he's a deputy minister. If Jonas says he was offered by the Guptas, I think you'll be well placed to ask the Guptas or Jonas. Don't ask me. Where do I come in?
The session was not without heated exchanges when the Speaker ordered the DA leader to leave the chamber after challenging Zuma's comments about the decline of the rand prior to Ntantla Nene being fired. The President also addressed the standoff between the Finance Minister Pravin Gordhan and SARS Commissioner Tom Moyane. He said he was dealing with the matter.
I am intervening on that question. I'm dealing with it at the presidential level. I have met both the minister and I've met the commissioner, and I'm addressing the issue.
He also assured the House that his government had a plan to deal with student funding. Mswandi Lembeje, SABC News.
The Steve Biko lecture turned into chaos as students disrupted a panel discussion on transformation. The lecture was taking place at Wits University in Johannesburg last night.
Who are you to tell us?
Unresolved matters spilling into the discussion. Chaotic scenes filled the auditorium. It all started as the Northwest University Vice-Chancellor was commenting on the recent burning of a library at the Mafikeng campus. Disgruntled students claim vice-chancellors remain ignorant on financial exclusion. But after an hour, peace was restored. The panel continued with the discussion.
If you ask me what is the possibility for addressing access, you kick off for now with the free education for the poor. The rich must, if you like, pay for it, and the middle classes, we look at a mechanism on a new funding vehicle.
There is no university, for example, that has enough residence accommodation. Most universities have residences for about a quarter of their students. We have been appealing to the state because residences are based on capital grants from the state. It's not something we kind of fund out of the fees.
What is the way forward?
Students raised their challenges on campuses.
It's easy to do so much more when you have food in your stomach, when you have somewhere to live, when you're not stressed about where your next meal is coming from.
Students feel more needs to be done.
Some of the persons who spoke did not directly address the issues of fees must fall. Maybe more direct open engagement is needed.
We're frustrated. We've been trying to talk, and it seems speaking does not help.
But vice-chancellors say government needs to come to the party. Mahakeketa Matabe, SABC News, Johannesburg.
A centre for leadership in honour of Alan Boesak has been launched in Cape Town. The former anti-apartheid activist and cleric thanked the community of Cape Town for their support during the launch. Boesak says the centre will stand for justice. He now works as a lecturer at an American university. Archbishop Emeritus Njonjonkulo Ndongani delivered the inaugural Alan Boesak public lecture. Ndongani commended Boesak for being an inspirational leader. He says the centre will play a role in developing leaders of moral integrity.
What a moment of hopefulness and inspiration as we gather in this magnificent place to dedicate this center in the Alan Boesak Legacy Center. May all who go through the doors of this center be inspired by the example that our dear friend Alan set. Here is a man who gave his life for the greatest cause, which is the liberation of humanity.
Congregation in struggles for justice, living with a pastor whose name is in the newspapers every single day, and not simply to praise him, and having to defend your pastor in your places of work, and sometimes with those who employ you. My colleagues in the NG Kerk who have heard from congregations in the Dutch Reformed Church in those days that they have decided to stop their support of those congregations. Gaan vra maar jou geld by Boesak. I know of those things. And yet, you remain so steadfast. You remain so true to your calling. You remain so clear in your own commitment to what was right.
Now, 2 people have tested positive for Ebola in Guinea almost 3 months after the outbreak in the country was declared over. The new cases were reported hours after the World Health Organization declared the latest Ebola flare-up to be over in neighboring Sierra Leone. The 2 patients are being cared for at a treatment center in the south of the country, close to where the worst Ebola outbreak in history was first identified 2 years ago. It's understood that 3 members of their family had recently died after showing symptoms of Ebola. The government says their village is now on lockdown and vaccines are being taken to the area to try and protect those at risk. The WHO has warned of sporadic cases of Ebola which are likely to re-emerge as the virus can linger on in body fluids of some survivors. To Europe now, European Union leaders are meeting with the Turkish Prime Minister Ahmet Davutoglu in Brussels to discuss proposals aimed at easing the refugee crisis. Under the proposals, migrants arriving in Greece from Turkey will be sent back in exchange for financial aid and other concessions.
EU leaders are offering Ankara financial and political concessions if it stops migrants reaching Greece. French President François Hollande says the EU-Turkey deal, which aims to cap the influx of migrants into Europe, has to be a comprehensive plan.
What I insisted upon was that this should be a comprehensive plan, which means it applies to Turkey, since Turkey will agree to readmit, to take back migrants who arrived from Turkey via Greece, and who were not able to assert their rights. Turkey will take these migrants back.
Greece Prime Minister Alexis Tsipras, facing a build-up of more than 40,000 refugees stranded in Greece by recent border closures in Balkans, says his economically struggling country needs more help to care for migrants. EU officials said Greece also needed time to set up legal and administrative structures to carry out the deportations.
Today, Greece is the one making the effort and who will make the effort tomorrow. And it is very important that titles be delivered quickly to those who will arrive, or to obtain the right of asylum, or to be escorted back to Turkey.
After a year in which more than 1 million people have arrived in Europe, fleeing war and poverty in the Middle East and beyond, EU countries are looking desperately to Turkey to seal its coastline and stem the flow. Ankara's central objective, visa-free travel for Turks to Europe by June, will depend on Turkey meeting a raft of long-standing EU criteria.
Now that's your news for now. After the break, Yevon will be standing by with your regional news, so stay tuned.
A romantic adventure film starring Ivan Boesak and Donnelly Roberts. The story begins in the beautiful vineyards of Paarl in the Western Cape. The adventure takes off when the characters find themselves on the tropical island of Love, Mauritius.
Josephine's work is more interesting and distinguishable. She visits war-stricken zone countries to tell the story of the damage war often leaves behind.
This particular exhibition's case, places that are named after conflict or disaster or war or reconciliation.
And basically what it is it's a collection of the best animated short films from around the world this year. And the idea is to inspire animators and directors with this exciting content. And so that's been offered to us as a cinema, and we're very excited to be screening the animated show of shows here in South Africa.
Join Refulo Mula for that 1 hour weekly dose of arts and entertainment news every Friday at 9 p.m. on Trends.
Welcome back. You're still with Newsroom. Time for us to shift our focus and have a bit more of a regional focus. Now, the Northern Cape Provincial Legislature is hosting a memorial lecture and unveiling of a mosaic plaque in honor of David Kruiper. This legendary leader and healer will be honored during a memorial lecture that will highlight the history and struggle for his people. Now, let's cross to our reporter, Margaret Mutibi, who's covering the story for us. A very good morning to you, Margaret. I understand that you have some guests with you today, but can you just tell us who David Kruiper was, this legendary figure in the Khoisan history?
Good morning, Yeben. We're actually at the Northern Cape Legislature this morning, and the reason why we are here is because the provincial legislature has decided to actually honor this great son of the Northern Cape, David Kruiper. Basically, many people remember him for his role in a movie called The Gods Must Be Crazy. I think that's where many people actually got to know him and heard a lot about him. And he was the leader of the Komani San in the Kalahari, and he fought a lot for many years to try and get the Komani San people recognized, and he also worked a lot in trying to preserve their heritage. So this morning, actually, there was a lecture that tried to speak into his legacy, also some of the things that he achieved, because I think you'd remember in 2004, he took a walk, actually, he hitchhiked basically from Andries Vale in the Kalahari, and he hitchhiked all the way to Cape Town to try and get audience with the then President Mbeki, where he wanted to speak about the issues of his people and the unhappiness of his people in terms of their land, and also trying to settle in the Kalahari. We joined this morning by the Deputy Speaker in the legislature, Mrs. Biekers. She will basically tell us why is it that you, as the Northern Cape Provincial Government, have decided to do something of this kind. What is it that you hope will come out of this?
Thank you very much, ma'am, and good morning to the listeners. The Northern Cape Provincial Legislature, this is an annual event. It's one of our strategic objectives in our program that we execute at the legislature. David Kruiper is een van those significant leaders who played a role during the transition to the democracy. And today we honor this, and on the present of the institution here, we've got the wall of remembrance, and we will unveil the plaque of the late David Kruiper. And the memorial lecture, it's again to re-educate our community in the province what David Kruiper stands for, the role that he played towards making our people free, and also give a voice to the Komani San community, of which he traveled the world to go and make his voices known in our province. Thank you.
Also joining us is Mr. Terence Ball, who has done a lot of work in terms of the work that David Kruiper did in the Northern Cape. We want to find out from you, in terms of the work that you have done and all the literature that you've read up about David Kruiper, what is it that was his legacy? What is it that he wanted people to know about him and about his people?
I made reference to the fact this morning that David Kruiper was the living embodiment of the longest unbroken chain of heritage in all of the history of mankind. We are talking here about a culture that goes back tens of thousands of years. He wanted to preserve all aspects of it. The language that gave us our Nguni clicks, the intellectual property, if you like, of the San, their knowledge of the bush, the healing powers of plants, etc., and obviously the languages. And that's what we were talking about today. What can we learn from him that can be transferred to other South Africans to make them proud of their heritage?
Talk to us a bit about the dictionary that you currently are trying to put together of the Nama language, which is one of the languages of the San people.
This is presently being handled by the provincial manager in the Northern Cape of PANSALB, the Pan-South African Language Board, and he is in regular contact with the San and Khoisan communities to identify languages that have not yet been covered. We were told this morning that the community has in fact produced a dictionary of the San language which David spoke, and we also have a Kokohuap dictionary which is a Nama language.
Thank you very much. That was Mr. Terence Bowles, who was joining us this morning to speak a bit about the work that he has done. And he was also speaking about the dictionary that is currently being put together in terms of one of the San languages in the Northern Cape. That was all from us at the legislature in the Northern Cape. Back to you in the studio.
Thank you very much to Margaret there. Yes, some people don't know David Kruiper, but he is an absolute legend in the Kgalagadi area, of course. That is the northern parts of the Northern Cape. For those of you who don't know, even north of Uppington, David Kruiper and his brother Rechopstaan Kruiper, of course, were the two iconic figures in that area. Now, earlier this week, more than 2,000 mine workers at the Sheba, Fairview and New ConCourt gold mines in Barberton in Mpumalanga down tools, accusing their union, the National Union of Mine Workers, of colluding with mine management and failing to address their demands. The workers were also demanding a salary increase that was reached last year. However, the strike was called off after the employer and the union reached agreement. But to give us a little bit more details on the accusations and counter-accusations directed to the union and the way forward, well, we're pleased to be joined by the Regional Secretary of the National Union of Mine Workers, Mr. Philip Manche. He's in our studio in Mbombela this morning. Very good morning to you, Mr. Manche. Thank you for joining us.
Morning, and how are you?
Very good today, sir. Please give us a quick update. What's the latest with regards to the industrial action that we've seen at Sheba, Fairview and New ConCourt?
Yes, thanks. We can confirm as National Union of Mine Workers that there was unprotected strike at Barberton Mines, where our employees were demanding that the task team from the NUM region must come and give them the feedback or the findings, because last year around December, we deployed a task team in that mine to go and investigate allegations that are saying other leaders are conniving with management and management are bribing them, and they are colluding with management in promoting other employees. So we therefore, after conducting that particular investigations, and then we compiled a report which was supposed to be given to the workers on Tuesday. So after we have postponed that meeting on Tuesday, then the workers were very much angry to say, why are we postponing the outcome? Because they are eagerly awaiting that particular outcome. Then that's why they went on strike. Then we went, therefore, to address them and to promise them that the outcome will be revealed to them or disclosed to them on Tuesday, the coming week. Then the members were very much happy to hear to their leadership that they will be receiving that particular investigation report on the coming week of the 22nd.
It must be disturbing for you as the NUM to hear, or for your members to accuse you of colluding with mine management in fixing prices and so forth. How do you respond to that?
Can you come again?
I say it must be very concerning that you are being accused of colluding with management.
Yes, those are the allegations that there were branch leadership that was colluding with management, and then we are still part of the investigation that the region was conducting was to establish those allegations. So up to now, there was a task team that was tasked to deal with such a report, and then they are in the position of that particular report, and then that report will be read to the members on the 22nd when we convene the mass meeting, which the workers demanded to listen to that particular report. Then after the workers receiving that particular report, we will take it, because remember, as SNUM, we are taking a mandate from the workers. We cannot now arrive on a conclusion to say what is it that is going to happen on the 22nd. After the members have given us a mandate, then we are definitely going to act upon that particular mandate after the report has been read to the members.
What about the salary increase that was agreed upon last year? Is that going to be implemented, or does that form part of your report as well now?
Come again?
What about the salary increment that was agreed upon last year? Is that going to be implemented?
Okay, no, there was a wage negotiations process that took place, and then there was agreement. Subsequent to that, there was an agreement which was signed around September. And then when we signed that particular agreement, and then there were other outstanding issues that we deferred them to be dealt with outside that particular bargaining process. Then we therefore agreed with management that we are going to embark on that process immediately after the signing of the wage agreement. But management were delaying the process to engage with them along those outstanding issues that members were hopeful that they are going to benefit or is talking to their benefits. So therefore, that's why the members now went on strike to say this process is delaying. When is the NUM and management going to start this process? But however, yesterday we have agreed with the management of Barberton that come next week after the task team report, then that particular process is going to kickstart. Then there were issues of housing and issues of bonuses and many other issues that were deferred to the task teams, which are going to be discussed. And members were very much happy yesterday when we are addressing them. And then that's why they hit the call from the leadership to go back and resume the work.
Thank you very much for joining us today. That's Mr. Philip Manche. He's the Regional Secretary of the National Union of Mine Workers in the Barberton area in Mpumalanga. Of course, much unhappiness there. And as you heard, this mass meeting will happen next week, the 22nd, that is on Tuesday. We'll keep you updated as to what happens with the salary and other negotiations in the Mpumalanga area. That wraps up our regional roundup of the news here on the Newsroom show. Kendall Mahamati is standing by. He's got a very interesting interview, of course, with regards to the fallout from the FIFA scandal here in South Africa. Don't go away. It's going to be a very interesting one.
News Today takes an in-depth look on news locally, continentally, and globally. We bring the world to your home. We cover all economy news extensively to keep you informed. We are live to break news as and when they happen across the world. We analyze news using experts in all aspects. Make a date with News Today every Monday to Friday from 3 to 5:30 p.m.
Hamate, now I've got your sports on Newsroom. As Evan said, I've got a very interesting discussion that I'm going to be having in this slot. But before we do that, before we speak to Steve Goddard, let's talk a little bit about Super Rugby, where the Hurricanes continued their winning momentum when they thrashed the Force 41-6 in a Super Rugby clash in Wellington. Both sides came into the match with identical records in 2016 after they'd secured only a win each after 3 outings. The home team scored 6 tries with fly-half Bowden Barrett on target with 4 conversions and a penalty. Let's take a quick look at some of the highlights.
So Coles gets into Vito. Oh, this is Dane Coles stretching. Now, did he get it down? Did he get it down? Gets it away here for Thompson. 3 or 4 metres away. Short pass. And the try scored by James Marshall.
Well, in the end, 75 is...
Arnie Savia pops it up to Coles. Marshall gets it back. Keeps it in the field of play. Perenara! And I think he's landed it on the line. He has. This kick went away to the left. This time he's nailed it. Bowden Barrett with a good conversion. Jason Woodward was right there, never quite got the ball. Now here's Laumapi for the corner. Yanni Laumapi might well have his first try.
Promises to be a very exciting weekend, what with Formula One rugby. Football happening. And talking of football, earlier this week, FIFA announced that it was imposing bans on SAFA officials on charges of match fixing. The Minister of Sports, Figi Limbalula, has come out in support of the officials, calling for due process and saying that he will not allow them to be bullied by FIFA. One of them, former head of referees, Steve Goddard, is here with us this morning. Steve, thank you so much for coming through to see us.
Welcome.
Just yesterday, the Minister of Sports had a press conference. And in that conference, he mentioned that he wanted to support you and the other officials in making sure that due process was being followed by FIFA and that he was not going to allow you to be bullied. He also mentioned that the lawyers had been and were going to get in touch with you. Have they done so yet?
Not at the current time.
All right. Now, please tell us, what do you make of this particular, what's happened over this last couple of days, where FIFA has come out and said you, along with former colleagues of yours, have been banned for being involved in match fixing?
Well, the first issue is that we reported the number of referees that have been involved with Football for You. And this was reported to the 2 instructors from FIFA who came down at the beginning of August to conduct courses for the national referees team.
May I ask you this? Which year was this?
This was 2010. It was August 2010. Now, the interesting fact is that I've had it confirmed that those two instructors, they reported back to FIFA, and they also did some investigations of their own with the match officials, which were all FIFA match officials, supposedly, that came in to do the friendly games. Now, the issue is that FIFA has been confirmed by Terry Steens, who was one of the original investigators that came down here. FIFA did nothing then until a letter arrived from the now SAFA CEO, Dennis Mumble. And that was sometime between 2011 and 2012. I don't know the exact dates.
Right.
That was when they dispatched the FIFA security team of Chris Heaton and Terry Steens down to South Africa.
Very interesting.
Now, it seems very odd to me that it took FIFA so long to actually react to the situation. The other issue being that eventually we get contacted by the FIFA Ethics Committee, and interestingly enough, at home we have been subject to a armed robbery at the house, and my email was no longer working. Now, it transpired that FIFA sent 4 emails before picking up a phone about 3 weeks later to ask me why I was not answering the emails. In the context of that, I was given sort of 3 days to get a visa to go to Zurich, and that proved impossible. They said that was the deadline. The deadline they were going to meet was June in 2015.
Wow. So
if I can just finish the situation, they eventually sent a documentation and demanded that answers were given, in my case, to 45 questions. The tone of the questions had you guilty at that point of something, not knowing what. But the answer came when it said you were allowed to appeal. And please attend a meeting on the 1st, 2nd and 3rd of March this year. I was quite prepared to do that until I saw the next paragraph, which says you will be required to pay your own airfare to Zurich and your accommodation whilst you're in Zurich. So being polite, I told them where to go.
My word. And this is for this year, this March, you were meant to have gone through to Zurich, and this is after you'd missed a series of emails because you'd had a burglary at your home prior to that last phone call saying you haven't responded, therefore you've missed the deadline.
Yes. I think the thing is that these characters on the FIFA Ethics Committee have never seen me face to face, don't know me, yet they've made a decision. And I sense that along the way there's some collusion. Difficult to prove, but it seems very odd that one can be tried in your absence.
Absolutely. Here's a question for you, for our viewers to actually get it from you. Have you ever fixed a match?
Never at all. When I was refereeing, nobody ever approached me to fix anything. And in 30 years of football, I have never fixed. I have constantly got into a situation where I've been tackling the corruption. I was still tackling the corruption on the Friday night before the document arrived from FIFA on the Sunday. I was tackling corruption in KZN Motsepe League, and that was where a bribe was being solicited for 12,000 rands. Now, I say to myself, 30 years for what? And at Sylvester and Derby, kindly said, "We've known each other for 30 years. How can this possibly happen?"
Did you ever see match fixing happening around you in the time that you've been working with SAFA and football in South Africa? Have you ever seen it happen?
I've seen it happen. I was once appointed to a game in Durban back in the 80s, where I was then removed after I'd arrived down there and replaced by another referee with 2 assistants who were trying to fix a game between Swallows and, at the time, Durban City. In fact, they did such a good job that they failed to punish a blatant push just under the crossbar, and the goal was conceded, which went against what they were trying to do. A Swallows player said to me on the way back to Johannesburg on the plane, we were offered 4,000 rands each to fix that game. That was one of the first. I've seen numerous other instances of corruption, and if we bring it right up to the current day, now what's happening with PSL is very, very interesting, because the lady heading up the Zimbabwe FA has been in the country, and all of a sudden we've got another corruption activity, this time in the PSL. Doesn't come as any surprise to me.
Oh, very interesting. Very interesting. Around the 2010 and the friendlies going into the 2010 World Cup and Bafana, is there anything that you saw that was untoward in the officiating?
Well, I found out just before the second friendly was played that the Football for You operation had been going for many years, and David Farney, who was visiting here, he actually came in on a CAF match. He stayed over to be the match commissioner on the second friendly. When I met him the day before, he needed to know the detail of what was going on in the game, being the match commissioner. I gave him the detail, and I also mentioned Football for You. He immediately told me that these people had infiltrated the Botswana FA and tried to fix there, and it cost the president of the Botswana FA his job, and that was where David Farney was. Now, I reported that back verbally to people within SAFA. After 2 days, I realised nothing was happening, so I rang the president, Mr. Kirsten Matandani, and I told him exactly what our colleague from Botswana had said, and I told him to get in contact with him. After that, nothing happened. Now, I look at an article, and this is what's really fired me up. I looked at an article in the Star where he supposedly absolved himself from any aspect of that situation because he was at a higher level than the people who were working on the ground in SAFA. And that really annoys me.
Yeah, he did say something about how it was more naivety from SAFA's side as opposed to direct corruption, that these things were allowed to happen and did happen.
Yeah. As I say, 2 days ago, that appeared in the Star. Now, it's simply put, a lot of the people who were involved in the corruption are still in and around football one way or another. When I listened to the ethics committee, and as I've said before, I didn't even know SAFA had an ethics committee. And that came as a big surprise to me, and I'm saying to myself, well, if there's an ethics committee there, why do they leave the job for FIFA to do? And this is where one's got to turn around and say, it's now time to bring a mass of things out into the open, and that's what I'm going to do.
we're waiting for that. Because one of the things that I do know is running up to the 2010 FIFA World Cup, there were a couple of matches which were quite interesting. Bafana Bafana doing extremely well. There is one in question, 5-0 against Guatemala we won, leading up to 2010. That was quite odd. I mean, that's the one that sticks out is, wow, there are flags all over that one.
Yes, at the conclusion of that match, I spoke to Dennis Mumble and told him exactly what was happening. Now, he was the team manager of Bafana Bafana at the time. The other thing I've since
when you said exactly what was happening, what do you mean? What did you say to Dennis Mumble?
I said to him, this match has been fixed.
The Guatemala match?
The Guatemala match.
You saw that it had been fixed. How did you know that?
Well, I knew it had been fixed because I was fighting in the trenches to stop these things happening. Remember, these games were coming every 3 days. Having reported the matter to the president, I didn't expect that it would continue. But as I say, nothing happened.
Wow. We certainly are waiting for that explosive expose that you're going to be coming out with. When are you planning to do that and in what form? How are you going to be letting everybody know exactly what went on?
Well, as far as the issue goes with the findings by the FIFA Ethics Committee, I am guilty of challenging them if they've ever looked at the word ethics, and that won't help me a great deal. But to hell if at my age I'm going to be accused of something I haven't done. It was not just the 5 friendly games which we tried to stop this thing. They tried to infiltrate a whole load of other friendly games, including the States against, at that time, were playing Australia. I had already allocated match officials to the game here, and then the Football for You brought in 3 match officials from Bosnia-Herzegovina with a view to putting them on that match. They were blocked and they flew back to Bosnia-Herzegovina.
Wow.
Now, if anybody really wants to get a good background to understand Football for You, under my name on the internet, Steve Goddard, football referee, on the 3rd page, we'll find a section which says Keelong Kings, and that is Perumal's e-book, which he has written whilst he was in jail. And if people look and see what Perumal says about me in his article there, then they've got a better chance of understanding my background and what I've always done in South Africa.
Steve, thank you for coming through. You've said some explosive stuff. I believe there's a whole lot more that you can share with us as well as our viewers. A lot of them have been very interested to hear what you had to say because some didn't believe that you or any of the others were guilty of match fixing. But I am very happy that we're getting to hear it from you, from the proverbial horse's mouth, so to speak.
Yes, you're welcome.
Now, Steve Goddard, former referee, former head of referees for SAFA, speaking to us about the FIFA ban. We need to take a short break, but before we do that, we have a look at the weather. there you go. That's where we leave it. Some explosive things and statements coming out from Steve Goddard there. We'll definitely be staying close to that story. Thank you very much for having joined us. Eben as well as Elvis will be back with us next week on Monday morning. And we do hope that you have a great weekend. Just a quick update on the score between Highlanders and Waratahs is 22 to the Highlanders, 0 to the hosts, the Waratahs. Have a great weekend.